There are places the light no longer touches, where the stones remember what we've forgotten, where fire once danced not for warmth, but for gods, for spirits, for something older than either. This is not the history they teach in books. This is what was left out, buried too deep, or whispered too low to be heard. In every corner of the earth, from frozen ruins to sun-scoured deserts, from jungle temples to windswept plains, there are signs, marks, circles, burnt offerings, and silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of something sealed, of rituals performed with trembling hands, and eyes that dared not look too long. These were not ceremonies made for the living, but contracts written in bone, in ash, in the breath held between life and death. They were meant to reach through the veil, to ask, to beg, to open, or to bind shut. Some rituals promised life beyond death. Others demanded death to preserve life. But all of them, every single one, left behind a trace, a scar. And today, we follow those scars. In the highlands of India, flames still rise on mountaintops, smoke curling into the dark sky, whispers carried in Vedic tongues that no longer exist. Monks say the fire speaks back. Archaeologists record voices that shouldn't be there. The smoke bends in unnatural ways. The ashes test strange. And no one knows why the formula still works. Only that it does. Deep in the Bolivian Andes, a carved stone cries blood during lunar eclipses. It is not paint, not rust, not water, but something red and warm and wrong. It has no match in human or animal biology, and it flows only when the moon forgets its light. Locals leave offerings. Scientists leave confused. The stone remains, silent, until it weeps again. Across an ancient plain in Turkey, skeletons are found curled with bones not their own, skulls missing, or placed in the wrong graves. Some believe it was ancestor worship. Others think it was identity theft, not of names, but of spirit, as if wearing someone's bones could bring them back, or erase them forever. Along the Japanese coast, a forbidden chant was once sung into the wind, Kaze no Yuta. They called it the Song of Wind. In 1998, a researcher recited it on camera. 6 hours later, a storm hit. Without warning, without logic. It came. It howled. Then it left, leaving behind questions and a broken recording device. Still humming. In the Egyptian desert, stone circles older than Stonehenge stare up at the stars. Some call them calendars, but others hear them whisper at night. The nomads will not walk among them. They say the stones sing to the sky, and the sky sometimes sings back. And in the jungles of Brazil, murals show masked figures, eyes painted black, surrounding a single soul bound by rope. No text, no explanation, only fear etched into color. When the cave was discovered in 1986, the local guide fled, ran screaming into the forest, never seen again. Whatever he saw, he had no words for it. These are just fragments, shadows of something greater, signs of rituals the earth has not yet forgotten. We like to think we've left them behind, that we are too enlightened, too advanced, too distant. But the soil tells another story. The bones tell another truth. And the silence between them whispers still. What if the chants meant more than metaphor? What if the fires were not symbolic? What if the sacrifices actually opened something, closed something, changed something? What if these were not mistakes, but successful rituals, ones that worked too well? Tonight, we follow the threads through time, through ash, through sound, through stone, from the glowing vaults of Malta to the sealed altars of Uar, from the shadows of forgotten islands to the mirrors that face only the sky. You will hear stories of kings buried alive to become stars, of statues that sleep with open eyes, of temples that echo your words before you speak them, of forests that consume more than they grow. These are the stories modern science cannot explain, rituals that still move, still breathe, still wait. So listen closely, breathe slowly, and do not speak the names aloud. Some are not meant to be remembered. Some are meant to stay silent, And some will answer back. It begins with silence. High in the Himalayan foothills, where the clouds drift low and the air tastes of cedar and ash, a single flame flickers against the dark. The wind doesn't stir it. The mountains hold their breath. And in the stillness of twilight, smoke begins to rise, slow, curling, sacred. This is no ordinary fire. It is Agnihotra, an ancient ritual, older than memory, born from the Vedas, the holy texts of India's distant past. Every sunrise and sunset, the fire is fed with offerings, dried cow dung, ghee grains. But it is not the fire alone that draws the curious, the pilgrims, the scholars. It is what happens after. When the smoke thickens and twists upward, the monks say, "You must listen carefully." For in the hush of that moment, the smoke whispers. And sometimes, the gods whisper back. In a monastery hidden near the village of Kulpa, cloaked in snow and pine, the ritual has remained unchanged for generations. The Brahmin priest prepares the fire with hands weathered by years of devotion. He murmurs chants in Sanskrit, a language few still understand in its truest form. The words are not just spoken, they are vibrated into the air, into the flame, into the breath of the earth itself. Offerings sizzle and pop as they burn. The smell is sharp, ancient, ghee and grain and earth mingling with cedarwood and incense. Smoke rises like a serpent, curling toward the sky. And then, something shifts. Witnesses have described it as a hum, a vibration not heard with ears, but felt. Cameras placed near the fire have captured audio anomalies, low murmurs, distant voices, sometimes even the distinct syllables of language no one present has spoken. In 1997, a team of researchers from Delhi visited a remote Agnihotra site in Himachal Pradesh. Their equipment was advanced, sensitive recorders, infrared sensors, and air quality monitors. But what they captured wasn't measurable by science. The lead researcher, Dr. Vivek Anand, later wrote, "At exactly 6:04 p.m., during the moment of offering, we recorded what sounded like chanting, overlapping voices, harmonious, but not traceable to any speaker. The monks present were silent. The audio was analyzed. No frequencies matched human vocal cords. No patterns matched known instruments or wildlife. The sound came from the smoke. The texts speak of the Antariksh, the middle realm between earth and heaven, where divine energies dwell. Agnihotra, they say, creates a bridge between worlds. Fire is the messenger, and smoke the path." In one 12th century manuscript preserved in the Banaras Hindu University Library, there is a passage that reads, "When Agni rises and the ghee cracks, the ancestors draw near. When the smoke takes form, the rishis speak." Rishis, ancient seers, said to possess divine knowledge. Some believed they were not men at all, but beings from another plane who walked among humans in forgotten times. Could it be that the rituals of Agnihotra, carefully preserved across millennia, are more than symbolic? That they are functional? Gateways? Conduits? The ritual is never performed casually. The fire must be lit at the precise moment of sunrise or sunset. The formulas must be exact. The space must be clean. The air must be still. And above all, one must never speak during the smoke's rise. In a remote village near Joshimath, a boy once laughed during the ritual. Just a whisper, a joke, a break in the silence. The fire sputtered. The smoke curled low to the ground. And the priest who led the ceremony collapsed moments later, his skin burning cold to the touch. They buried him that night. Stranger still is the language of the ritual itself. While many mantras are chanted in classical Sanskrit, some Agnihotra formulas contain words that linguists have never traced. They do not appear in any known dialect, not Vedic, not Pali, not Tamil. These words are handed down orally, memorized by heart, never written. Even among learned monks, only a few are permitted to recite them. One word recurs in many ceremonies, Vamartha. No one knows its meaning. Some believe it is a name, others a key. In 2013, a linguist from the University of Pune tried to reconstruct a chant from memory, with permission from a monk. The recording device refused to start. 3 different microphones failed in succession. When they finally captured the chant on analog tape, the audio played backward. And even then, it whispered Vamartha. There are stories, quiet ones, not shared with outsiders, of smoke that changes direction in still air, of voices that call out from the fire, of shadows dancing in the corners of rooms long after the ritual ends. In one monastery near Kedarnath, the Agnihotra fire is kept burning for 40 days without interruption during certain lunar phases. The smoke blackens the walls. The priest stays silent, and when it is over, they say, dreams become clearer. One monk claimed to have seen his grandfather in the smoke. Not just a vision, a conversation. The man had died decades earlier, but he spoke of things the monk had never known. Names, places, a buried family secret that proved true. How does one explain this? Hallucination? Suggestion? Or is there something in the smoke? Something waiting to be heard? In the Valley of Spiti, a legend persists. Long ago, a king sought immortality. He summoned the greatest Vedic priests and built a temple of stone and flame. For 108 days, the fire burned. The sky blackened. The villagers fled. On the final day, the fire vanished. Not extinguished, vanished. No embers, no ash, just a ring of scorched earth. The king was never seen again. But some nights, when the wind is right, travelers swear they smell ghee in the air and hear chanting. From nowhere, the smoke, they say, remembers. It twists and turns like time itself, carrying words long forgotten, names buried by centuries, prayers uttered by trembling voices. And if you stand very still, in the right place, at the right hour, you might just hear the whisper. The fire never truly dies in the highlands of the Himalayas, where the cold air carries the scent of ash and the voices of the ancient ones linger in the stillness between breaths. There's a place beyond the temple walls where no roads reach and no maps name it, only whispered directions passed from monk to monk, a journey made in silence beneath stars that do not move. They call it the hollow of the breath. Hidden within a narrow gorge carved by forgotten rivers, it is a clearing where no birds sing, where the grass does not grow, where the stones are always warm though the sun never touches them. At the center stands a blackened stone basin, its edges smooth as glass, its shape oddly perfect, not carved, but placed as if it had always been waiting. This is where the original fire was said to be lit, not by human hands, but by the gods themselves. The legends tell of 7 sages, the Sapta Rishi, who received the first chance in their dreams, flames that spoke without sound, smoke that danced in shapes of meaning. Each sage carried a different chant, each word a key to a realm unseen. When all 7 fires were lit, the smoke met in the air, forming a spiral that glowed with color and song, and the mountain held its breath as time paused. The fire remained for 7 days and 7 nights, never flickering, never fading, fed by no wood, no ghee, no grain, only the breath of those who circled it. When it vanished, the stone basin remained, and those who had spoken the words lost their voices for the rest of their lives. They say the chants had to be given away, spoken once, then forgotten, burned into the air. Only the smoke remembers. In 2011, a team of independent archaeologists, led by Professor Asha Mehra, attempted to locate the hollow of the breath, using ancient land records and astronomical alignments found in Vedic manuscripts. For weeks they wandered the mountains, guided by weathered texts and local whispers. Their instruments failed repeatedly, batteries drained faster than expected, compasses spun in slow, lazy circles, the GPS refused to load. When they finally reached the suspected location, the clearing was exactly as described. No birds, no wind, no plant life, just warmth rising from the stones and an unnatural stillness that pressed against their lungs. They stayed one night. Only one. That evening they built a small controlled flame at the center and read aloud a chant transcribed from a pre-Vedic palm leaf manuscript. The moment the last syllable was spoken, the fire turned blue, then violet, then deep black. The smoke rose vertically into the sky in a narrow column that did not sway. Each of the 5 researchers reported hearing voices. Different voices. One heard a child calling another, an old woman humming, a third said it was her own name spoken in a voice she had never heard before but instinctively knew. By morning, one member of the team had vanished. No signs of struggle, no tracks, no sound. Just gone. They never returned to the site. Their notes were published, but heavily redacted, whole pages removed, entire audio recordings labeled as corrupted. Yet one photograph survives. It shows the smoke rising perfectly straight, while the trees in the background bend, as if pushed by wind in every direction. The Vedas speak often of Agni, the fire deity, the divine carrier of offerings, the mouth of the gods. But in a lesser-known appendix, called the Atharva Veda, there is mention of something else. Agnitam, the hidden fire. Not visible, not touchable, but summoned. A fire that consumes no material but memory, intention, and breath. Rituals invoking Agnitam are rare, mostly referenced in cryptic side notes. One mentions a ritual where smoke is not the result, but the purpose, where the shape of the smoke determines the outcome, not the flame itself. And always these rites must be performed in silence, complete and perfect, for even a single word can unravel what was meant to bind. In one surviving scroll, the words are carved rather than inked, each letter shallow, as if the scribe feared pressing too deep. It warns of the echo of the smoke, a moment when the smoke pauses as if listening, and if it finds imbalance it will answer. There are monks who have trained their entire lives for silence, not just the absence of speech, but the stilling of thoughts, the slowing of heartbeat, the control of every breath. In the monastery of Hemis, such monks are known as listeners. They conduct the fire rituals not to speak, but to hear. One listener named Tenzin remained in the smoke chamber for 7 days, without food or water, his body in perfect meditation, the fire lit before him, renewed twice daily by others. When he emerged, he was blind, not from injury or illness, but by choice. He claimed that what he saw in the smoke made the world unbearable. He spoke only once more before taking a vow of eternal silence. He said the smoke was not just remembering, it was watching. There are modern experiments in India, the US, and Japan that attempt to replicate the Agnihotra conditions in controlled environments. They have managed to recreate the chemical profile of the smoke, the precise timings, the ambient temperature and humidity, the chanting frequency. But never the result. The smoke rises and dissipates, but it does not whisper. It does not listen. Because something is missing. The breath, perhaps. The belief, maybe. Or the silence between the sounds. In the dead of winter near Badrinath, a temple keeper records strange occurrences around the Agnihotra altar. Footprints appear in snow around the fire long after it has burned out. Not human footprints. Longer, thinner, no heel. Only in fresh snow, never when the ground is dry. Dogs refuse to cross the altar space even when dragged. Birds avoid the sky above it even in migration season. The fire is never left unattended, and the smoke is always observed carefully. Yet sometimes it drifts toward a direction with no wind and remains suspended, as if waiting for a response that never comes. There is a temple carved directly into a mountain face in the Garhwal region, rarely visited and closed to the public. Inside there are wall carvings of smoke tendrils rising into the sky, forming shapes not of gods or men but of eyes. Hundreds of them, all open, all watching. The oldest inscription simply reads, "Where smoke is seen, thought is weighed." Perhaps the ritual was never meant to summon anything. Perhaps it was always a test, not of knowledge, but of silence, of intention, of presence. And the smoke, like time itself, listens, waits, and remembers. Even now, in the forgotten folds of the Himalayas, in temples warmed by sacred fire, there are moments when the smoke shifts unnaturally, when shadows flicker with no flame, when a name not spoken aloud is heard behind closed eyes. And the one who hears it knows something has heard them too. Next time you see smoke rising, not from the city, not from machines, but from fire tended with care and silence, pause. Do not speak. Do not breathe too loud, because what you are seeing is not just vapor or ash. It is memory rising. It is thought unraveling. It is the breath of the gods. And it might just be listening back. It begins on a night when the sky forgets its stars, when the moon turns to rust and the air feels heavy with something unnamed. High in the Bolivian Andes, far beyond the reach of paved roads and flickering city lights, a strange stone rests on a ridge of black volcanic rock. Locals call it Piedra del Sol Sangriento, the stone of the bloody sun. It stands alone, carved with ancient grooves and faces that do not resemble men. A monolith barely taller than a man's chest, yet older than any written history in the land. And on certain nights, when the sky darkens into eclipse, the stone weeps. Not rain, not dew, but something thick and red that smells of copper and burns the air around it like fire without flame. It bleeds, and no one knows why. The village of Quilacas lies nestled in the shadow of the mountain. Life there moves slowly. Llamas graze the hills, children carry firewood along winding paths, and the elders tell stories by hearthlight. Stories of gods that drank from stone. Stories of warriors who gave their hearts willingly. Stories of a time before the Inca, before empire, before forgetting. According to the oldest among them, the Piedra del Sol Sangriento was once the heart of a temple, a shrine to a deity whose name is never spoken aloud. They call her La Madre de la Sangre, the mother of blood. She was not a goddess of harvest or rain or sun. She was the goddess of sacrifice, of silence, of the thin line between offering and curse. The first mention of the stone in colonial records comes from 1587. A Spanish friar named Alonso de Mercado described a blood-slicked altar high in the hills above Lake Popo. He wrote of a full moon ceremony interrupted by an eclipse. Villagers fell to their knees as the stone wept red in the moonlight. Mercado dismissed it as pagan trickery. 2 days later, he was found dead in his quarters, his body dry, his skin pale, as if drained. There were no wounds, only a small red mark over his heart. The report was sealed and buried in church archives. It remained hidden for 4 centuries. In 1972, a team of Bolivian geologists surveyed the area for mineral veins. Their instruments detected unusual magnetic activity around the stone. They expected iron. Instead, they found a veinless formation that responded to lunar cycles. On the night of a partial lunar eclipse, one of the students returned to the site with a camera. What he filmed became a local legend. The footage, grainy and silent, shows the stone glistening in moonlight. Then slowly, a dark red liquid begins to seep from a fissure near the top. It pools at the base. The camera shakes, then cuts to black. The student was never seen again. Only the tape remained, and the stain on the stone. The stone is covered in carvings, faces without eyes, hands with too many fingers, spirals that tighten into points so small they seem to vanish. Some say these were made during the Wari Empire, long before the Inca, by a forgotten people known only through broken relics. Others believe the stone was not carved, but grown, that the shapes are not decoration but expression, attempts by something beneath the earth to communicate, to warn, or to hunger. In 2009, a team of scientists from La Paz visited the site under strict permission from local authorities. They were warned not to touch the stone during an eclipse. They agreed, but when the sky darkened and the moon began to vanish into shadow, one of them reached out, just to brush the surface, just to feel the stone's warmth. The blood began to flow instantly, not from the stone, from him, his nose, his eyes, his ears. He collapsed in seconds, unconscious but alive. He would later say he heard music inside his skull, a low vibrating hum that spoke not in words, but in memories he had never lived. The blood sample collected from the stone that night was sent to 3 labs across the world. The results came back identical. The substance was biological, but not human, not animal, not known. The red fluid held cells with spiral nuclei and unknown proteins. It resisted decay and reacted violently to light. One lab destroyed their sample after it melted through 2 layers of containment. Another lost their sample entirely. It evaporated overnight, without a trace. The villagers hold a different understanding. They say the stone weeps when balance is broken, when the sky and the ground drift too far from each other, when the living forget the dead. It is not a punishment. It is a reminder, a call, and someone must always answer. That is why the children do not climb the hill, why the path to the stone is left unmarked, why no one speaks the goddess's name after sundown. There is a ritual rarely spoken of even among the elders, performed only when the blood runs too long. It involves smoke from burning coca leaves, a mirror of obsidian, and silence, absolute silence. No chants, no prayers, only breath and flame. And if the stone calms, if the bleeding stops, the ritual is deemed successful. If not, the village must choose. A gift, an offering, someone who will walk alone to the stone at dusk and never return. They do not speak of what happens there, but the stone is always dry the next morning, always waiting, always watching. They say the moon is the eye of the goddess, and when it turns away, when it hides behind the earth, she sees with the stone instead, and in that moment, blood becomes language, sacrifice becomes memory, and time bends toward the mountain like smoke drawn into breath. The stone remains unmoved by seasons or storms. It does not erode. It does not crack. It remains exactly where it was placed, or where it grew, or where it waited, long before men walked the high ridges, long before names had sound, long before the blood of the living was ever offered to anything beyond the stars. And still it waits, for the next eclipse, for the next whisper of red in the cold moonlight, for the next forgotten ritual to stir beneath the skin of the earth, and the mountain to remember. The wind over the Bolivian Andes carries more than cold air, and the smell of earth, it carries memory. Memory locked in stone carved by hands that left no names, etched by time itself into the dark altar, known only as Piedra del Sol Sangriento. The sky above it remains clearer than glass, except on the nights it turns red. Nights when the moon disappears behind the shadow of the earth, and the stars blink slower than usual. That is when the blood comes. And when it does, no animal cries, no wind moves, no breath dares disturb the silence. A stillness so complete it feels alive, as if something waits just beneath the stone surface, watching, listening, remembering. In 2021, a scholar from the Universidad Mayor de San Andrés arrived with a mission to uncover the true origins of the ritual. Her name was Dr. Lucia Marquez. Her ancestors were born near Quilacas, and her grandmother told her the stone once spoke to their family in dreams. Lucia never believed it until she saw it herself. The stone was warm to the touch, though the night air froze the skin. It pulsed faintly beneath her fingers, not with heat, but with something deeper, a rhythm like a slow heartbeat buried in obsidian. She brought with her a translation of an ancient Andean manuscript found in a collapsed temple over 300 kilometers away. It was written in a dialect no longer spoken, but it contained a single symbol, a spiral, identical to one carved at the base of the stone. Her team camped near the ridge for 10 days, recording measurements, collecting samples, scanning the stone with ground-penetrating radar. What they found was not a foundation or a burial. It was a cavity, hollow space beneath the stone. Something vast, a chamber perhaps, or a tunnel descending deep into the earth. Too deep to drill, too ancient to date. They left sensors overnight. By dawn, the data showed seismic activity localized entirely beneath the stone. But the earth had not moved. It was not an earthquake. It was a vibration, as if something far below had stirred. The elders warned her not to stay past the next full moon. But Lucia remained. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Remember, child, if it bleeds, it remembers. On the night of the eclipse, the sky turned the color of old rust. Clouds gathered where none had been before. The air thickened, the mountain groaned, and the stone wept. This time it bled from every carved spiral, from every weathered face, and from the hollow at its base. Lucia watched in silence as the red liquid trickled into the soil without soaking in. She whispered a word she did not understand. Vaskara, a name found in the manuscript. The wind stilled, the liquid thickened, and then she heard it. A hum from the stone itself, low and mournful, like a forgotten voice, calling from a locked room. Her camera captured the sound, but when played back it was silent. Only the movement remained. Only her face turned toward the stone, and her lips mouthing that word again and again. Vaskara. In the months that followed, Lucia disappeared from public life. She never published her findings, never returned calls. Her research team dispersed without comment. But the villagers say a woman now walks the hills near the stone, wearing a red shawl and never speaking. She watches the sky, and the stone watches her. The blood of the stone was tested once more, this time by a private European laboratory under contract from an undisclosed source. The results never reached the university, but a leaked image from the lab showed something extraordinary. Not just cells, But movement, the liquid was alive. Not bacterial, not viral, but cellular, responsive. When exposed to certain sounds, it changed shape, coiled into spirals identical to those carved into the stone. The lab was shut down weeks later after a containment breach. No samples remain, at least none admitted publicly. Local legend speaks of a final offering, a ritual too dangerous to perform, one that calls forth the full power of the goddess. Not to weep, but to awaken. It requires silence, not just from the mouth, but from the soul. For 3 days no fire is lit, no word is spoken, no shadow is cast. Then at the peak of the eclipse, a mirror is placed at the base of the stone. The mirror must reflect the blood, but no one must look into it. If they do, they see her, La Madre de la Sangre, and what is seen cannot be forgotten. It burns itself into the eyes, into the sleep, into the name. Those who survive are not the same. Some lose the ability to speak. Others stop sleeping. A few begin bleeding from their eyes whenever the moon darkens. The villagers call them the marked. They are given food and silence, but never spoken to, and never allowed near the stone again. No one knows how the ritual was first discovered. Perhaps by accident, perhaps by instruction, perhaps whispered by something that rose from the deep. But the fact remains. The stone remembers the offering, the mirror remembers the face, and the blood remembers the name. There are those who say the stone is not from earth, that it fell long ago during a storm with no thunder, that it landed burning, that it sang. They point to the unknown composition of the blood, to the strange cellular patterns, to the magnetic anomalies, and the seismic hum. They believe it is an artifact, not sacred but sentient, not carved but awakened, and that it waits, not for worship, but for return. The final page of Lucia's notebook was found torn and weathered, buried beneath her tent weeks after she vanished. It contained only one sentence, written in 3 languages, Quechua, Spanish, and a script no one recognized. The words read, "The stone is not bleeding. It is remembering how. Some say the next eclipse will be the last, that the stone will not cry, it will speak, and that the mountain will answer, and beneath it something ancient will rise, not in anger, not in joy, but in hunger, and in memory of blood." So if you ever find yourself in the Andes under a rust-colored moon and feel the wind go silent and the air thicken, if you smell copper and hear no sound, if you see a stone weeping in the dark, do not approach, do not whisper, and above all, do not look into the mirror, because what we call myth, what we call legend, is simply memory too old to bear, and the stone remembers everything. It begins not with a whisper, but with a silence so deep it unsettles the soul. A silence not born of peace, but of absence, of something missing, buried not in soil, but in the memory of stone. The ruins of Catalhoyuk lie quiet now. Crumbled walls rise no higher than a man's waist. Painted murals fade beneath centuries of dust, but underfoot, beneath packed layers of ancient clay, rest the bones. Dozens of them, hundreds, twisted, stacked, and not quite right. Some skulls rest with no bodies, some bodies with no skulls. Others contain bones from different lives, different shapes, different ages, fused together as if memory itself had been stitched, not healed, but forced. This was not accident. This was ritual, and those who performed it left no names, only signs and silence. The village of Catalhoyuk once stood as one of the world's first cities. 9,000 years ago, its mud brick homes pressed tightly together like a hive. No streets, only rooftops. People moved by ladder and climbed into their homes through holes in the ceiling. They shared fire, they shared space, and they shared the dead. The floors of their homes held secrets. Beneath the hearths and sleeping platforms lay graves, always close, always beneath. The living quite literally walked upon the memories of the dead. But what archaeologists uncovered beneath those floors was more than burial. It was arrangement, design, skeletons missing key bones, femurs replaced with smaller humeri, ribs twisted inward like shields, and most disturbingly, skulls missing entirely, or worse, skulls added that did not match the rest. bones of children paired with jaws of adults, women's pelvises with men's spines, each rearranged with care, each buried with precision, each one a stranger to itself. Who were these people? Why were they disassembled? What did they believe? One theory suggests ancestor worship, that family members kept skulls of the dead and later buried them with reverence. But that theory does not explain the stranger combinations, the foreign bones, the multiple individuals packed into one. Nor does it explain the positioning. Many were buried in a fetal posture, but some were contorted, faces turned sharply to the side, arms crossed unnaturally, as if the body had resisted even after death. In one house, archaeologists found 7 skulls stacked in a perfect circle. No bodies, just skulls. Their jaws removed, their faces turned inward. Around them, symbols of eyes painted on the wall. Watching, always watching. One skull stood out, painted in ochre, a deep red, like dried blood. It had been removed from the ground long after burial, carried, handled, perhaps even worshipped, then buried again, this time with the bones of 3 others, none of whom matched its age or sex. It was the only object in the grave painted, the only one that seemed to speak. But no one knows what it said. Catalhoyuk is not unique in its treatment of the dead, but nowhere else do we see such deliberate confusion, such intentional misplacement of identity. Was it a form of punishment or protection? Were bones swapped to prevent spirits from finding their way back, or to give the living something new to carry? Some scholars whisper of identity transference, of ancient rites designed to place a soul not in the afterlife, but in another body, a ritual of exchange, not farewell, but continuation, through replacement. The murals support the idea. In one house, a painting shows a headless figure standing before a crowd. In its place, a bird, or something like a bird. Another mural shows 2 human shapes merging into one, their feet planted in opposite directions, their arms crossing at the chest, one face calm, the other screaming. Above them, a spiral, drawn in thick black lines, not symbolic, but ritualistic, a map perhaps, a pathway between selves, or a warning not to follow. The locals who live near the site now, the quiet villages that surround the low hills of Konya, still refuse to visit after dark. They say the earth there moves on its own, not shaking, but settling, like something restless beneath the dust. Some say they hear voices, muffled, not words, just sounds, breathing maybe, or dreaming. And always, they speak of strangers, not people from other lands, but those who look like you, speak like you, but wear a face not theirs, who remember things you never told them, who dream of homes they never lived in. In 1996, a research team stayed overnight inside a replica of a Catalhoyuk house, a controlled experiment. They slept on clay platforms above replica graves. They lit fires in traditional hearths, and they stayed silent, just to see what they might feel. One of the researchers woke screaming. She said she had seen a face beneath the floor, looking up at her. Its mouth was open, but the sound came from her own. She refused to re-enter the site. Her notebook was found days later in her locked room. Inside, pages filled with a single sentence, over and over. I do not know who I am. I do not know who I am. I do not know who I am. Even now the bones remain catalogued, measured, labeled, stored, but no one can truly explain them. Each skeleton a puzzle with pieces from other boxes, each one buried beneath symbols that only raise more questions. Hands with extra fingers, eyes with no pupils, animals with human limbs, and always, the spiral, always turning inward, as if inviting you to look closer, to follow it into the dust, and become something else. The last dig season was cut short. A series of small collapses in the central mound. Tunnels they never dug appeared, perfectly square, leading nowhere, filled with nothing but air and silence. The team left quietly, their reports thin, their notes vague, but one photograph slipped through. A grave, newly opened. Inside, A skeleton with two skulls, one in place, the other resting on its chest. Both staring forward, both human, both smiling. They were buried facing the east, toward the rising sun, toward what comes next. And as the morning light passed over the ruins, the shadows of the walls lengthened and touched the bones. For just a moment, a shadow passed over the empty eye sockets, and they seemed to blink. There are places where time forgets how to move, where history lingers, not in ruins or relics, but in the silence between footsteps. Deep beneath the surface of Catalhoyuk, where the earth holds its breath, lies a chamber that was never meant to be found. It was uncovered by accident during a survey scan, a hollow space beneath House 47, long thought to be solid. No stairway led to it, no tunnel, no entrance, only packed clay and untouched soil. When archaeologists removed the upper layers, they found it sealed with smooth stones arranged in a circle, each marked with a spiral pressed by hand into damp earth, as if someone long ago had tried to keep something in or something out. Inside they found bones, but not just human, not just animal, something else. Twisted, elongated, wrong. The chamber was round, no larger than a single room, yet every surface was marked. The walls were etched with eyes, hundreds of them, each different in shape and depth, each carved with obsessive detail. They stared from every angle, watching each corner, each breath. The floor was bare, but in the center sat a single stone pedestal, and on that pedestal lay a skull. Small, too small for an adult, too narrow for a child, and fused with something else. A fragment of antler, bone grown into bone. Nature and man merged not by force, but by purpose. Intention, a rite, one that had no name. When the team entered the chamber, the air was dry, but heavy, as if sound itself had weight. They spoke softly at first, then not at all. Even the lights seemed dimmer underground. Photographs taken inside came out blurred, no matter how still the camera remained. Audio recorded nothing, only silence, not even breath, as if the air refused to carry human sound. One member of the team refused to re-enter after stepping out for a break. He claimed something had followed him up. Not footsteps, not touch, just a presence, a weight on the back of the neck, like being stared at by someone who had no eyes. The chamber was unlike any other in Catalhoyuk. No signs of habitation, no fire pits, no tools, only ritual, only witness, and that skull, that impossible skull. Carbon dating placed it over 9,000 years old, but the antler fused into the cranium belonged to a species extinct for over 12,000. The bone showed no signs of cutting, no binding, no fracture, only seamless union, as if grown together from the beginning. The edges laced in ochre, as if blood had once sealed them. Whispers spread quickly among the workers. Some said the chamber was a place of making. Others said it was a prison, a place where things were changed, not killed, transformed. A researcher from the nearby Kanyar Institute recalled an old tale passed down through generations of the bone garden, a place where the dead were planted and grew back as something new, not reborn, but reassembled. A different shape, a different name, and always a different purpose. At night the winds changed, no longer soft and dry, but sharp, low, like breath drawn through teeth, and always toward the chamber, never away. Dust moved unnaturally, settling in spirals, forming lines across the excavation site that matched the etchings on the walls. Animals avoided the area. Birds flew in wide circles overhead. Even insects vanished from the soil. It was as if the ground itself exhaled something old, something watching, waiting. In the central archive of Ankara, an untranslated tablet, discovered decades ago, was finally reconsidered. It had been found far from Catalhoyuk, but the spiral symbol matched exactly. It told of the rite of strangers, a ceremony where names were given and taken, where bones were swapped, where souls were offered for renewal, not in the afterlife, but in this one. A cycle not of death and birth, but of replacement. A man could become another. A child could hold the memories of someone long buried. The face would change, but the spirit would remain. Not reincarnation, something more precise, something surgical. In the final lines, the tablet warned of the hollow, a place below the city where memory grew thick, where echoes walked, where names forgotten still lingered in bone. It said the spiral must never be completed, for at the center waits not a god, but a reflection, and what sees you may decide to wear you. 3 weeks after the chamber was opened, a team member went missing, her tent untouched, her boots still at the entrance, only her trowel gone. They found her later at the edge of the dig site, barefoot, kneeling in the dust, staring at the horizon. When spoken to, she did not respond. Her mouth moved, but the words were wrong. Not gibberish, language, but none anyone recognized. She had drawn spirals in the dirt around her, 7 of them, each with a dot in the center. Her notebook revealed sketches of faces with no mouths, of bodies stitched from many, of hands reaching up from soil, and one final sentence scrawled over and over. I have remembered someone else. She was airlifted out, but never spoke again. Her voice returned weeks later, but it was not hers. The accent changed, the tone deeper. She sang lullabies no one taught her, mentioned names no one knew. In sleep she whispered directions, coordinates, numbers that matched ancient dig maps from the 1960s. She had never seen them, could not have known, unless something had told her, or something within her had always known. Since then the chamber remained sealed, a decision made quietly, no official report, just silence. But the locals say the wind still changes when the moon is high, that footsteps echo on stone no one walks, that shadows stretch where no light falls. And always, they speak of strangers, men who pass through the village with familiar faces and unfamiliar eyes, children who speak with voices too old, women who dream of houses buried under earth they have never touched, all drawn toward the place beneath the floors, where names are exchanged like garments, and bones remember more than flesh. They say you should never walk the ruins alone, not because of what is seen, but because of what might see you and want to wear you. So if you find yourself standing in the dust of Catalhoyuk and feel the ground shift beneath your feet, if you see a spiral drawn in the sand where none should be, if you look into a cracked window and see your own face blink before you do, walk away. Do not speak. Do not listen. And above all, do not dig, because some bones belong to no one. Some skulls never held a single soul. And some rites, once begun, do not end. It begins with a sound that is not a sound at all, a low vibration that passes not through the ears, but through the bones, a presence carried on air that tastes like sea salt and old copper. Somewhere along the jagged coastline of western Honshu, where the land meets the restless waves of the Sea of Japan, there are stories older than language, stories whispered by wind and answered by something listening. They call it Kaze no Yuta, the song of wind, not sung, not spoken, but breathed into the spaces between words, a chant as old as the tides, said to call upon forces unseen, said to move clouds and break skies. The shrines that hold the memory of this chant are small and crumbling, tucked into cliffs and mist-covered hills, often hidden behind thick pine forests or built into rock faces where no road dares climb. Their gates are low, their steps worn, their walls lined with stone tablets inscribed with warnings, not curses, not blessings, but instructions, to speak only within, to chant only when called, to never utter the song when alone, and never outside sacred ground, not even in jest, not even in whisper. The chant itself is never written in full. Only fragments remain carved in spiral forms or recited during ceremonies long forgotten by the outside world, passed from elder to child, from memory to dream. Each word carefully pronounced, with breath not voice. Each syllable drawn out to mimic the wind's own rhythm. And those who hear it say the air shifts as it's spoken. A sudden stillness, followed by distant rushing, like something vast stirring beyond the horizon. The first recorded mention comes from a Yamato scroll dated around 700 BC. It describes a ritual performed on a cliff edge during the equinox. Priests clad in robes of reed and shell stood in silence as one voice whispered the chant, not to the sky, but into a hollowed reed pointed at the sea. Moments later the waves rose, the clouds darkened, and a gale swept across the shoreline without warning. The scroll calls it a gift, but not a gift from the gods. A gift from the wind itself. Something living, something that remembers. Local villagers from the Noto Peninsula still passed down tales of wind summoners, men and women who could calm storms or call them forth. They lived alone on high ridges where the wind never ceased. Their windows faced west, their doors faced east, and their homes had no roofs, for the sky was their ceiling. They carried no tools, only long strands of cloth and hollow bamboo. When a storm threatened, they would stand barefoot in the rain and breathe the chant, not once, but 3 times. By the third breath, the storm would listen. Sometimes it would pass, sometimes it would stay, and sometimes it would speak back. In 1998, a graduate student named Hiroshi Okabe traveled to an abandoned shrine near Fukui. He had read a translated note in a private manuscript suggesting that Kaze no Yuta was not merely symbolic. He wanted proof. He brought a camcorder. He brought a recording of the partial chant taken from an obscure folklore book published in the 1930s. And he brought a reed flute carved in the same style as those found in ancient burial mounds. He stood before the shrine under a pale sky. The wind was calm. The sea was still. And he began to breathe the chant. Not speak. Breathe. The camera rolled. The trees did not move, but the birds fled. And in the distance, clouds began to churn. The video surfaced weeks later on a late-night local television program. Short and grainy, Hiroshi stood on a stone platform. He closed his eyes. The air around him began to blur. A sudden burst of static cut through the audio. Then silence. And then, a low howl. Not wind, but something like it. Something deeper. Something layered. As if many voices moved in opposite directions at once. The sky behind him turned slate gray. The sea rose in jagged peaks. The camera shook. The last frame was of Hiroshi's face. Eyes open. Mouth closed. But his chest rising and falling in time, with a rhythm not his own. Then, cut to black. Hours later, an unexpected typhoon struck the nearby coast. Unseasonal. Unpredicted. It moved inland faster than any model could track. Winds reached over 100 kilometers per hour. No deaths, but dozens injured. Homes uprooted. Power lines torn from the ground. And at the center of the path, a single ridge, where the shrine once stood, flattened, stones scattered like bone. Nothing left but sea-salted earth and a single piece of cloth caught in a dead tree. Bright red, marked with the spiral symbol of wind. Hiroshi was never found. His name removed from university records. His apartment emptied within days. His family never spoke publicly, but neighbors recall strange sounds before the storm. Low chanting, despite the windows being shut and the apartment empty. They say the wind outside his door moved the wrong way, spinning inward, pulling not air, but sound. Some say Kaze no Yuta is not a chant at all, but a conversation, a call to something that never left. An ancient force not of gods or demons, but of memory, of motion, of the breath between stars. And when spoken by those who do not understand, it listens, and it responds, not with kindness, not with cruelty, but with its nature, a nature that moves, and tears, and remembers. In the Kyoto archives lies a forbidden scroll, wrapped in silk, stamped with a warning not to open on cloudy days. It contains phonetic lines of the chant written in old hiragana, alongside diagrams of wind spirals and tide charts. At the bottom, a final line reads, "Do not breathe the third breath unless the sea has answered twice." What happens if the sea does not answer? The scroll does not say. In some fishing villages, children are still taught to bow twice when the wind changes suddenly, to whisper into their palms and blow gently toward the ground. They do not know why, only that their grandparents told them, and their grandparents before that, and always. The wind listens. Some rituals are forgotten because they were unneeded, others because they were too dangerous. And Kaze no Yuta belongs to the second kind, a rite that stirs the sky, that wakes the sea, that breathes not with lungs, but with time. The chant is not gone. It waits, in cliffs eroded by waves, in reeds swaying beneath stone shrines, in breath held just long enough to remember the shape of an old name. It waits for the third breath, for the one who dares to call, to answer, and to listen. It is said that some winds do not begin with air, but with memory. Memory shaped by voice, by breath, by ritual performed not to honor the gods, but to speak with the sky itself. And along the coast of Shikoku, in a village that no longer appears on maps, there once stood a shrine not of wood or stone but of earth, and reed built low to the ground, shaped like a spiral nest with a hollow center facing the ocean. The villagers called it the throat of the wind. It was said that if you stood at the center and whispered the first line of Kaze no Yuta, the wind would shift just slightly enough to be felt on the back of your neck, even on still days. The chant was never taught in full, not even to elders. Only fragments passed through generations, like a song half remembered in sleep. The first line for greeting, the second for listening, the third never spoken, because the third was not a call but an invitation. And once spoken, something answered. In 1967, an ethnomusicologist named Masaru Hino recorded a fisherman in Kochi humming what he believed was a variant of Kaze no Yuta. The melody was breathy, slow, almost circular, impossible to notate properly on a Western scale. The man claimed his grandfather taught him to hum it when the sea grew still and the fish disappeared. He said it brought the wind back. Not always a good wind, but always a real one. The recording captured something strange. Faint wind noises beneath the melody, despite the studio being sealed. The instruments picked up a deep resonance, like distant thunder, though no storms were near. The fisherman died 2 days later, swept from his boat by a sudden gust that came without warning or clouds or sound. Masaru Hino labeled the recording voice of the hollow air and never played it again. It was archived, sealed, and forgotten. Until recently. In 2015, an intern at the National Museum of Ethnology discovered the reel and digitized it. Curious, he played it aloud on headphones late at night in an empty lab. Within minutes, a draft passed through the sealed room. Loose paper stirred despite the vents being shut. The lights dimmed. The temperature dropped 2 degrees. And from the hallway came the sound of someone breathing slowly. The intern turned off the audio, and the room returned to normal. But his computer never worked again. The audio file vanished. The reel was missing by morning. The only thing left behind was a sticky note on the intern's desk. It read, "Do not breathe the third." Further west in the prefecture of Shermaine lies an island known for its sacred stones and quiet forests. Few people live there now. But high on a cliff, there remains a weathered stone tablet half buried in moss carved with symbols that predate modern kanji. A visiting linguist identified 3 phonetic glyphs matching those found on a wooden relic pulled from the sea after the 1998 typhoon. The relic bore spiral grooves across its length and a hollow center like a flute with no mouthpiece. It was shaped to sing, not to play, and the air passed through it without effort, as if drawn by invisible hands. A local elder watching the demonstration warned them to stop. He said the wind remembers its song, and it hates being mocked. There are reports from pilots flying over the Sea of Japan who speak of sudden turbulence above calm waters. Moments where the sky dims slightly, though no clouds are near. Where instruments freeze for seconds and altimeters flicker. One pilot reported hearing music through his headset during one such episode. No transmission, no signal, just a low humming followed by breath. Not static, breath. His co-pilot confirmed nothing was broadcast, but both men remembered the same tune. Neither could recall where they heard it before, only that it felt familiar and wrong. In folklore hidden in the mountains of Tottori, there is mention of a being called Kaze no Ko, the voice of wind. Not a spirit, not a god, but a force given shape by the chant. It is described as faceless and tall, with robes made of drifting mist and hands that leave no prints. When it appears, the wind dies completely. Not a breeze, not a sound. Only silence thick enough to press against the skin. It does not speak. It breathes. And if it breathes your name, you forget it. You forget your face, your past. You become someone else. Someone who remembers the chant in full. They say this being was once human. the first to speak the chant fully outside the shrine, the first to hear the sky speak back. But no mortal mind can hold the voice of wind without breaking. So it shed its form, and now waits for another, someone brave enough or foolish enough to speak the third breath again. In 2004, a researcher vanished during a typhoon while conducting a solo study on coastal erosion. His tent was found intact, supplies untouched, but the ground outside was marked with spirals carved shallow into wet earth. His notebook was discovered days later at a neighboring shrine. The final page contained only one phrase written in hiragana backward. I sang and the sky blinked. Then nothing, only wind. When people disappear near these coasts, the locals say they are not lost, only taken, carried by the breath that waits beyond the cliffs. Their names whispered in the tide, their faces replaced by mist. Sometimes the wind brings their voices back, echoes caught in bamboo groves or hidden in the rustling of fishing nets at night. Soft tones that resemble lullabies no one sings anymore. There are shrines that still stand where the chant is remembered but never spoken, where prayers are shaped like breath, not words, and offerings are given in silence. Thin ribbons hung on branches with no names written, only spirals, always spirals, drawn to remind the wind that someone remembers, but not enough to wake it. They say when the last shrine falls, when no one remembers the first two lines, when someone sings the third by accident or design, the sea will answer, the sky will open, and something will return, not to destroy, not to rule, but to breathe. And in that breath the mountains will bow, the rivers will rise, and the name of the wind will be spoken one final time. Then silence, true silence. So if you stand on the cliffs of Western Japan and feel the wind vanish all at once, if you find a reed flute buried in sand or hear a low chant with no voice behind it, close your eyes, cover your mouth, and do not breathe, because some songs are not meant to be sung. Some chants are not made for human lungs, and some winds do not blow. They wait. It begins in a place where the stars burn brighter than fire and the wind carves stories into stone, a place where the earth is dry as bone and time walks slowly in circles. Far out in Egypt's western desert south of the Great Pyramids, beyond the reach of Nile waters and tourist maps, lies a place most have never heard of, Nabta Playa, a basin of ancient silence scattered with forgotten stones and an unyielding heat that remembers things older than history. Here the sand hides secrets, and among them, something unnatural, perfectly placed, deliberate, a pattern of stones aligned with stars long dead, circles that do not move, orbs that do not fade, watching, waiting. Long before the rise of pharaohs, before the first temples of Giza were imagined, before the Sphinx first saw light, there were people who walked this land. Nomads, skywatchers, keepers of silence. They left no writing, no language, no trace of their names. Only stones. Massive stone slabs weighing tons arranged into circles and lines that defy coincidence. Some upright, some fallen, some buried, all placed with purpose. At the center of the arrangement lie 6 massive stones, standing in formation. Their placement aligns precisely with the rising of Orion's belt during the summer solstice. Not approximately, not roughly, perfectly, as if the earth itself had been measured against the sky. This circle is surrounded by strange orbs of blackened rock, rounded, smooth, unnaturally shaped, as if molded not by wind or time, but by unseen hands. Locals call them Ain el-Najma, eyes of the star. They shimmer at night, though no light touches them. They hum softly in windless air. And some say, they whisper. The Tuareg nomads who travel near Nabta Playa avoid the basin altogether. Even when water is scarce, even when the sky promises rain, they speak of the whispering place, a land where time folds inward and dreams walk during daylight. They say the stones speak in the voice of stars, and that no man who sleeps among them wakes unchanged. One elder warned, the orbs are not stone. They are memory. They hold what we were, and what we should not become again. In 1974, a team of archaeologists discovered the first clues, buried beneath meters of sand, charcoal pits, animal bones, pottery, signs of ritual, signs of life, and more stones. Always stones, arranged in circles, aligned to constellations, tied to solstices and equinoxes. The site was declared older than Stonehenge, possibly older than the first Egyptian dynasties. A calendar in the desert, a temple of time. But the orbs were different. They were not part of the alignment. They had no carvings, no marks, yet they were always near, as if drawn by the stones themselves, or sent to watch them. In 1999, a researcher named Dr. Leila Mansour camped near the central circle during the week of the solstice. She was drawn to the alignment of Orion, curious how such precise astronomical knowledge could exist without writing. She recorded temperature, light, sound, motion. At midnight on the third night, her instruments detected low-frequency vibrations, not seismic, not environmental, regular, rhythmic, like breath. The orbs hummed, all of them, at once. She approached one, touched it. It was cold, and the hum stopped instantly. She felt dizzy. Her ears rang, and for a moment, she said the sky shimmered, as if reality had rippled, like heat waves, but colder, sharper. She never returned to the site, but her recordings were archived. Most play only silence, but one file, at precisely 2:43 a.m., contains a faint whisper, in a language no one recognizes. The voice is soft, genderless, calm, repeating a single phrase, over and over, as if remembering something lost. There is no record of these orbs being moved. No one has ever seen one lifted. No photos of their removal. No footprints around them. And yet they shift, very slightly, night to night, never far, but always closer to the central stones, as if orbiting, or converging, like planets drawn to gravity, or worshippers drawn to a forgotten altar. The Bedouins tell of a traveler, a foreign man, who entered Nabta Playa during the hottest month. He was seen walking among the stones barefoot, muttering to himself. He stayed 3 nights. No fire, no shelter, only water and silence. When he emerged, he was different. He spoke perfect Arabic, though no one had taught him. He named stars no one had heard. He smiled at shadows. He spoke of time as if it were a road he had walked already. Then, he vanished, leaving behind only a notebook filled with spirals, circles within circles, always centered around a single word written in trembling script. Asetka. No one knows what it means, but some believe it was a name, or a warning, or both. NASA satellites have recorded unusual thermal signatures from Nabta Playa. The area heats and cools faster than surrounding land. The orbs remain at constant temperature day or night, unaffected by sun, unaffected by sand, like they exist slightly out of sync with everything else, as if they belong to a different clock or a different sky. Theories abound: alien artifacts, Atlantean remnants, fossilized consciousness, but none explain the hum, none explain the whispers, none explain why birds do not fly over the basin, or why wind turns inward when it passes the edge, or why shadows fall the wrong way during equinox mornings. The orbs are always watching, not with eyes, but with presence, with stillness, with memory, and the longer one stays among them, the harder it becomes to leave. Some say the orbs are not waiting for us to understand them, but for something to return, something that once stood at the center of the stone circle when Orion crowned the sky, something that used the stars not for stories, but for passage, not myth, but map, not gods, but gatekeepers. And Nabta Playa was the keyhole. One night a desert storm swept across the basin, a rare event. Rain fell briefly, lightning struck the edge of the stone ring, and every orb glowed, only for a second, but it was seen, by satellite, by eyes, by instruments, and in that moment, the hum became a song, low, wordless, ancient, as if the desert itself remembered a name it had buried. The next morning the sand had shifted, revealing a new pattern among the stones, a spiral, not carved, but shaped by the storm itself, leading outward from a circle, toward the rising sun, or something beyond it. In the heart of silence, where the wind buries its voice beneath the sand, something waits. Not hidden, not asleep, only still. In the desert basin of Nabta Playa, where stone and star once spoke the same language, the orbs remain. Dark, motionless, unchanged, and yet the land around them feels different with each passing season. The ground rises ever so slightly near the central circle, though no tectonic activity is recorded. The stars above seem to shimmer longer when viewed from within the formation. Time slows not by clocks, but by breath, by instinct, by the feeling that hours stretch thinner than they should. And always, the orbs remain where they should not. In 2006, a team of researchers attempted to map the exact placement of each orb using GPS and thermal drones. Their goal was to create a three-dimensional model of the basin and determine whether the layout held a deeper geometry beyond star alignment. What they found defied explanation. Each orb, when plotted, revealed not just a pattern but a sequence, a spiral expanding outward from essential stones. Not perfect, but pulsing. The distances between them varied not randomly but rhythmically, as though responding to some cosmic beat. A pulse too slow to hear, too vast to feel, but present. One researcher called it a breathing map. Another refused to continue the project, claiming the numbers kept repeating in her dreams. She sketched circles in her notebook during waking hours without noticing. When asked, she could not explain what they meant, only that they felt right, familiar, wrong. Further excavations revealed fragments of pottery near several of the outer orbs, unadorned, crude, but strangely magnetic. Each shard contained traces of hematite and an unknown mineral not cataloged in desert geology. One fragment hummed when held, a sound just below perception, a sensation in the fingertips, like static from a place without electricity. It was sent to a private lab for analysis. The results were never published. The lab reported a containment failure days later. The sample was lost, the report sealed, and the lab burned in a fire with no determined source. Only ash remained, and the sketch of an orb drawn into the wall with soot. Some nomads still tell the story of the night of the falling moon, a tale passed from elder to child with no dates, no details, only images. A night when the moon did not rise, when the stars blinked all at once, and when the orbs whispered together, calling something back, not with words but with weight, with memory. The story ends the same each time. A man walks into the center of the stone circle at dawn. He places his hand on the orb nearest to the eastern stone, and the wind stops. The sun halts, and the man is never seen again, but his shadow remains burned into the sand until the storm comes. In 2020, satellite imaging captured something new, a ripple in the terrain around Nabta Playa visible only in infrared. Not an object, not a structure, but a ring of heat, perfectly circular, expanding outward, then fading, as though something had pulsed from beneath the earth. One image showed faint concentric lines crossing the basin in precise arcs. Each arc passed through an orb. Each line intersected at the central stones. Mathematicians attempted to replicate the pattern. They failed. The equations broke, divided by zero, returned errors that made no sense. They stopped trying, and the images were archived, marked anomaly. Local legend speaks of the shepherd with no name, a figure who appears during moonless nights, walking the edges of the stone field with bare feet and covered face. He does not speak. He does not sleep. He only watches the sky. When asked his purpose, he simply places a finger to his lips and points upward. Some believe he is a guardian. Others say he is the last remnant of those who built the circle, the one who remembers the true name of the stars and waits for them to return. In a cave near the Nubian border, markings were found identical to those at Nabta Playa, carved deep into the stone wall. Circles within circles, spiral pathways, drawn with obsessive repetition. Among the carvings, a single figure stands alone, faceless, arms raised, surrounded by floating spheres. Each sphere contains a different sky, stars that do not belong to this planet, constellations unknown. One scholar from Cairo claimed the figure represented the bridge between heavens, a traveler who used the orbs to move between worlds. Not metaphorically, literally, that the stones were not altars but locks, and the chant once spoken could open them, if remembered fully, if spoken at the right time, to the right sky, with the right breath. In 1978, a Bedouin tracker named Alim camped near the basin for 3 nights alone. He returned thin, hollow-eyed, his voice barely above a whisper. He said nothing at first, then slowly began to carve. Using bone, he etched patterns into stone walls near his tent. He did not sleep. He did not eat. For 7 days he carved. When asked what the shapes meant, he wept and answered in a single word: home. There are those who believe the orbs are counting, measuring the return of something long absent, that their placement shifts not with weather or wind, but with celestial tides, marking the slow turn of a cosmic wheel. And when the final alignment comes, when all the orbs hum in unison and the circle completes its silent countdown, the sky above Naphtali will open, not as a metaphor, but as a memory remembering itself, and light will pour downward not from the sun, but from the space between stars. Some rituals are not prayers but instructions, some monuments not tombs but keys, and Naphtali may not be a place at all, but a question, left for us to find, to misunderstand, and to ask again. So if you stand at the edge of the basin under a sky that feels too wide, and you see orbs where none should be, dark against the horizon, still as death, and humming ever so softly, do not enter the circle, do not listen to the hum, and do not follow the spiral path in your dreams, because once it begins, it does not end. It only returns. It begins where the map fades to green, where sound doesn't echo but disappears, where the trees are so thick they block not just sunlight, but memory. Deep in the Brazilian Amazon beyond the rivers, that twist like sleeping serpents beyond the villages, that speak no names, lies a cave that does not want to be found. It is carved into black stone, hidden by hanging roots and thick moss, its mouth shaped like a half-closed eye. Locals call it Boca do Silencio, the mouth of silence, and for good reason. No birds nest near it, no animals drink from the pool that forms at its base, and the tribes who know of it do not enter, not even in daylight, not even together. They say it belongs to those who wear no eyes, the masked ones, the shadow tribe. In 1986, a Brazilian expedition, sponsored by a European university, set out to catalog unrecorded cave systems in the Tapajós region. The team included archaeologists, geologists, and local guides familiar with the land. Their goal was simple: to document, to photograph, to leave footprints in places that held none. What they found was not on their maps. A cave partially collapsed, overgrown with vines, and nearly invisible from the air. But inside, an opening tall and smooth as a sculpted arch, too perfect to be natural. The guide stopped at the entrance, his body stiff, his face pale. He whispered something in Tupi, a prayer, or a warning. Then he dropped his flashlight and ran into the jungle. He was never seen again. The team pressed on. Inside the cave, the air was cool, heavy, not musty, but clean, still, as if it had not been disturbed in centuries. The walls were black, volcanic, but smooth, marked by ancient symbols and long faded pigments. Further in they found them, the murals, dozens, maybe more, painted in red and ochre, depicting figures in ritual poses, bodies twisted in motion, hands raised, palms outward, faces obscured, each one wearing a mask, round, expressionless, eyes missing, not blank, absent, as if sight had been removed deliberately. At the center of one mural, a figure was bound, kneeling, arms tied behind, a mask hanging above it, suspended in the air, unattached, yet watching. Surrounding it, 6 others, masked, identical, arranged in a perfect circle, symbols below their feet, spirals, waves, and one that resembled a closed eye with lines radiating outward like veins. One team member noted the figure had no eyes, not painted, not implied, just smooth skin where sight should be, as if vision had been carved away. They documented everything, but as they moved deeper, the air grew colder, Too cold for the region. One flashlight flickered, then another. They blamed the batteries, humidity, fatigue, until the third one died, and the fourth. They turned back and found the entrance seemed further than before, as if the cave had stretched. When they emerged, the sun had shifted far more than expected. They had been inside for 3 hours, but their watches said 20. Later that night, the lead archaeologist, Ana Ribeiro, reviewed the photos. Several of the murals appeared different. Slight changes in the figures. The bound one now had a hand lifted. The circle was tighter. The mask above had shifted slightly downward. She checked the negatives. They matched the originals, but not her memory. She called the photographer. He confirmed the change. He remembered painting fragments missing from the mask. Now whole, clean, sharp, new. That same night, Anna woke to find her tent door unzipped. The jungle silent, utterly still. No frogs, no crickets, no wind. She stepped outside and saw them. Figures, 6 of them, standing beyond the clearing, motionless, tall, wearing round masks that caught the moonlight. No eye holes, no mouth slits, just smooth white, watching, waiting. She blinked. They were gone. No footprints, no sound, only the cold, still clinging to her skin. She returned to the cave the next day, alone, determined, drawn. Inside, the murals had changed again. Now the central figure was wearing the mask. The ropes gone, the others kneeling, their masks cracked, broken. The spiral beneath the new figure's feet, now painted in deep black, fresher, wet to the touch. Anna did not return that evening. The others searched, called her name, waited. At dawn, they found her shoes at the cave mouth, neatly placed, side by side. Inside the cave, a new mural had appeared. 7 figures this time. One in the center, tallest, arms outstretched, mask unbroken. Below her feet, a new symbol, an open eye, painted in red. The expedition ended. No further searches were sanctioned. The cave was never mapped, never named, erased from records, but not forgotten. The tribes know. They always knew. They say the masked ones are not spirits, not people, but something else. Keepers of what was taken, of what should not return. And when someone sees them, truly sees, they do not vanish. They stay behind the eyes, waiting. In the years since, other caves have been found with similar murals. In Peru, in Colombia, even parts of Bolivia. Always remote, always hidden, always showing the same thing. The circle, the bound figure, the mask descending. One mural in Ecuador shows the circle around a fire, each figure holding a single white stone. At the center, an empty space, waiting, ready. Some believe the masked ones were a tribe that vanished before the known civilizations, wiped from time by their own hands, their language buried, their faces erased, their rites performed not for gods, but for silence, a covenant to keep something below, something buried in caves like this one, something that cannot see, but can hear, and must be bound by silence, ritual, mask, and memory. The final report of the 1986 team remains classified, but a page was leaked. A single photograph attached, black and white, faint, blurry, but clear enough to see. 7 figures, standing in the dark, all masked, all facing forward, and in the corner, Anna's shadow, raised hand, palm outward. Some caves breathe, not with wind, but with memory, not with lungs, but with something older, deeper. In the jungle basin where roots grow thicker than light and time slows into silence, the cave, called Boca do Silencio, still stands untouched, unmarked, avoided. Its mouth remains dry even through the rainy season, as if water refuses to enter. The vines around it curl away instead of toward, as though drawn back by an unseen hand. Inside, the air remains cold, still, and somewhere within the dark, beyond the reach of lanterns, the murals remain, or change, depending on who enters. 3 years after Ana Ribeiro vanished, a second team returned. funded by a private foundation known only for its work in undocumented sites across South America. No university badges, no press, just men and women with cameras, notebooks, and heavy gear. They arrived with no guides, no local contact. They moved fast. Their base camp set away from the tree line far from the cave mouth, as if aware of something unspoken. For 6 days they took notes, entered the cave only in pairs, never alone, never at night. But on the 7th night a storm rolled in. The forest went quiet, and one tent was found empty. No prints, no signs of struggle, only a spiral drawn into the wet soil outside the flap. Thin, precise, as if etched with a fingertip. The team left early the next morning, their report sealed. No statements made. But weeks later pages surfaced online. Pages from a field journal soaked in mildew, edges torn, text smeared, but legible. The writer spoke of the murals, described their movement, their change. One passage stood out. Each night the bound figure rises higher in the mural, its back straighter, its hands looser. The others begin to kneel, their masks cracking, their limbs thinning. It feels like something is waking up, and we are helping it. Another page included a sketch. Rough, unsteady, 7 figures again. But this time the center one held something. A white object, circular, smooth, like a stone or an egg. Lines radiated from it, like veins or branches, spreading outward to the others, connecting them, binding them, and beneath their feet, the spiral again, now opening at the center, like an eye beginning to blink. Local stories resurfaced after the second expedition. Old warnings once told in hushed tones around fires, now repeated with urgency. Stories of a shadow tribe not born but shaped. A people who wore masks not to hide but to protect. Not from enemies, but from themselves. Because what they had learned in the earth could not be forgotten and must not be shared. They built the caves to hold the memories, to bury the knowledge, to bind the ritual. One tribe, one bound, 7 watchers, one truth. No eyes, no mouth, only breath, only silence. Further into the cave, past the last known chamber, lies a passage never entered. Too narrow for most, too low. But one story tells of a man who crawled through. An old miner from Para. He found the cave while searching for iron, fell into a hollow, lit his torch, saw the murals, returned weeks later, thin, mute, carrying a mask he would not remove. White, cracked, no eyes, no mouth, only a single spiral carved into the forehead. He died days later, smiling, his hands locked together as if still holding something. His final words written on the wall in ash. She breathes now. She listens. Anthropologists studying the murals note that no other South American culture uses such uniform iconography. No other region has depictions of figures so devoid of identity. No facial features, no clothing, only the mask, the binding, the circle, a ritual without variation, as if passed down unaltered, as if memory was the purpose. Not worship, not myth, but containment. Each mural a lock, each ritual a key turned once to close, and perhaps once more to open. In 2001, satellite imaging picked up thermal anomalies near the cave. Small, but regular. Every solstice, every equinox. Heat from the ground where none should be. A rhythm of breath. Inhale, exhale, as though something beneath remembers the sky and marks time not in days, but in awakenings. A researcher returned alone. An act of obsession or desperation. No journal, no camera, only a recorder. His voice in the first few hours is calm, methodical. He describes the murals, the changes, the stillness, then static, then silence. 12 hours later the tape resumes, but the voice is different, slower, deeper, breathing between each word. I wore the mask. I saw her. She has no face. She is all faces. She is waiting. The tape ends with breath, then a whisper, then silence. The mask found near his campsite was identical to the others. Same spiral, same shape, But one difference. This one had a crack across the forehead. Thin, fresh, as if something inside had pushed. Not out, but inward, as if drawn back, not forward. The tribes near the Tapajos still passed the warning that some caves are not meant to be explored, that some faces are not meant to be drawn, that to wear the mask is to surrender yourself to the memory beneath, and that once you enter the circle, you do not leave alone. Something comes with you, not seen, not heard, but felt, a presence in your breath, a stillness behind your eyes, a cold that never fades. So if you walk deep into the Amazon and the air grows quiet and the leaves tremble though no wind stirs, if you find a cave with walls too smooth and murals that seem to watch, do not go inside. If you do not speak. If you must speak, do not name her. And if you find a mask carved from white stone lying alone in the dark, leave it where it rests, for it is not yours, and once worn, it cannot be removed, only replaced. It begins underground, beneath the golden stone of Malta where the sun never touches and the air carries the weight of forgotten sound. There is no breeze, no sky, only silence, and beneath that silence, a hum, not heard but felt, a vibration that presses against the ribs like breath from a mouth that does not speak. Welcome to the Hypogeum, the House Saflini Hypogeum, a temple older than the pyramids carved by hands whose names were never written, a sanctuary of echo and stone built for voices not meant for the living. The entrance is unassuming, tucked between buildings in the small town of Paula. Few know what lies beneath. A maze of carved chambers, 3 levels deep, passageways like arteries, red ochre spirals curling along the walls like veins. At its heart, the oracle room, smooth and circular, shaped to carry sound like water carries light. Here the walls are tuned, not designed, tuned, resonant at exactly 111 hertz, a frequency that stirs something primitive, something older than thought. In tests conducted decades later, people exposed to this tone experience visions, disorientation, sudden calm, and in some cases, paralysis. They felt watched, and some spoke of dreams, of stone figures that hovered above them, eyes closed, hands folded, listening. The temple was lost for centuries, buried beneath soil and time, discovered by accident in 1902 when workers digging a cistern cracked open the ceiling. One man went down with a rope and did not return. When they found him, he was conscious, but silent. He never spoke again. He only drew spirals, eyes, and once, a figure without a mouth, sleeping on its side. As the chambers were explored, more anomalies appeared. Bones, hundreds, stacked carefully in alcoves, mostly long bones, femurs, tibias. The skulls were few, and those that remained, strange, elongated, smoothed at the back, as if shaped or grown. They were hidden in a niche now called the Holy of Holies, a space carved to align with the winter solstice, where light never reaches, but something else does. A pressure, a presence. Visitors here often report the same sensation, that they are not alone. Even in silence, even in stillness, something else breathes. Not around them, but within them. The ancient Maltese are said to have performed rituals here. Low chanting, rhythmic breath, repetition, no words, only tone, only intent. The walls responded, echoed perfectly, not repeating, but harmonizing, like the temple itself was singing back, a duet between flesh and stone, each chamber resonating with different force, some calming, others sharpening. One room caused spontaneous tears in listeners, another induced nausea, but only when a male voice chanted. Female voices produced no reaction, a curious detail, and one that remains unexplained. In 1940, a soldier stationed nearby broke into the Hypogeum on a dare. He brought a lantern, a notebook, and a harmonica. What he found was never confirmed, but he left behind a single entry, scrawled quickly, uneven. She is not stone. She is listening. He deserted the next day, vanished before transport. Some say he boarded a fishing boat. Others believe he never left the temple, and that something followed him out. The most well-known mystery of the hypogeum surrounds a group of schoolchildren. In the 1940s, a class visited on a tour. 30 students, a teacher, a guide. They entered the lower level. The group became separated. For 20 minutes, only echoes returned, then silence. When they were found, the children were quiet, unblinking, the teacher pale and shaking. They were led out, one by one, each child whispering the same phrase. They are waking. The deeper levels of the hypogeum are now closed to the public. Too unstable, too dangerous. But some say it is not the stone that is fragile. It is the sound, and what it remembers. Sound never dies. It travels, reflects, echoes forever if the walls allow it. And these walls were made to remember, not voices, but intentions, emotions, ritual. And over time, that memory settles, thickens, learns. In the late 1990s, researchers with sonic equipment mapped the acoustic signature of the temple. They expected echo. What they found was reinforcement. Sound did not reflect. It built, layer upon layer, like stone breath holding its form. And when a single chant was played through a speaker, the room responded, not with an echo, but with a second tone, lower, slower, unrecorded, as if something else had sung back, something beneath, or beyond. The statue known as the Sleeping Lady was found in the temple's upper level. A small clay figure curled on her side, eyes closed. She does not wear the robes of ritual. She does not carry tools. Only rest. Only silence. But her face is content. Peaceful. Untroubled. Unlike the other carvings, which are vague, abstract, eyes wide, mouths open, as if caught mid-breath or mid-chant. Some say the Sleeping Lady was not a goddess, but a priestess, the last to complete the rite, laid to rest after binding something within the chamber. A seal not of stone, but of sound, and as long as the tone remained undisturbed, so would she, so would they. Yet in recent years, visitors report new sensations, dreams of figures lining the walls, of eyes opening slowly in the dark, of breath warm against their necks. When no one is near, one tourist collapsed during the guided tour, mumbling a phrase in a language no one knew. When translated, it meant, the sleepers no longer dream. And in the oracle room, when all sound fades, some claim to hear movement, not footsteps, but shifting, stone on stone, as if something heavy turned over, slowly, deliberately, waiting for a voice strong enough to finish what was started. Some places are not meant to be visited with eyes. Some temples are not built to house gods, but to hold them still, to keep them quiet, to keep them dreaming. Beneath the island of Malta, beneath limestone and dust, beneath layers of centuries, sleeps a structure older than empires, and perhaps older than memory itself. The House Saflieni Hypogeum does not sleep like other ruins. It breathes, softly, slowly, with chambers shaped not only for ritual but for resonance. Rituals performed not with flame or offering but with voice alone. Voice that lingers, voice that shapes, voice that awakens. In 2007, a small team of engineers entered the oracle chamber with new audio equipment. They wanted to understand why the stone sang, why tones vibrated in strange ways, why visitors felt faint or wept or saw shadows where none should be. They recorded a test chant at 111 hertz. They played it back. The stone responded, not echo, but harmony. And beneath that, a third tone, one no one had placed. It was low, barely audible, like something groaning from below, like the sound of stone shifting in its sleep. The engineers left before their shift ended. 3 of them never returned to the site. One destroyed his field notes, said he dreamed in spirals for 12 nights, that he could still feel the sound in his chest, like a second heart beating under his own. The hypogeum's lowest level remains closed to the public. They say the air is too damp, the floor unstable, but those who have seen it speak differently. They say the space feels wrong, not dangerous, but inverted, walls too narrow at the top, chambers that taper down into impossible corners, and statues, not many, but enough, tucked into alcoves behind slabs of stone, figures with folded arms and featureless faces, some upright, some lying flat, their stone bodies smooth, unweathered, unfinished, but watching, with eyes closed, some carved with their ears elongated, as if listening to something inside the stone, or something beneath it. There's one chamber on the lowest floor that has never been opened fully, blocked by a stone door too large to move, carved with 7 spirals, each nested within the next. No inscriptions, no handles, only an opening the size of a fist near its base. In 1971, a small camera was inserted. What it saw remains disputed. Footage grainy, dark, but unmistakable. A single statue in the center, larger than any found before, lying on its side, curled, with one arm tucked beneath its head, and both eyes open, but not human. The proportions were wrong. Arms too long, spine arched backward, mouth open in mid-breath, and one detail more disturbing than the rest. The mouth was not carved. It was a hole, deep, dark, unmeasured, a void in the shape of a scream. The camera's battery drained in seconds. The footage ends in static, and a sound, not a voice, not a word, a breath, drawn in, not out, as if the chamber inhaled. The stone door was sealed the next day. The camera never recovered. No one speaks of the chamber officially, but staff whisper of it, of the sound that comes from beneath the floor when no one else is near. Not often, only on the longest nights of winter, when the stars vanish behind cloud, and the wind outside the stone walls forgets how to move. The sleeping lady statue once rested near the upper levels, now housed in a museum, but her copy remains in place. Visitors who pass by her often report a sensation of weightlessness, like sinking into something not physical but familiar. Some say she smiles, though her mouth is small and fixed. Some say her chest rises and falls, though the stone shows no cracks. And some, only a few, say they hear music when they close their eyes beside her. Not melody, but tone, a vibration that hums behind the eyes. Low, continuous, like the earth remembering a name. In 2012, a scholar named Eleonora Vestry stayed inside the hypogeum overnight. A special arrangement. She wanted silence. She wanted resonance. She brought tuning forks, measuring equipment, and a recorder. She placed herself at the center of the oracle room, spoke the first tone, waited, then the second, waited, then the third, and something replied. She dropped the fork. The tone continued, unbroken. Her recorder picked up the resonance for exactly 13 seconds, followed by her voice, but altered, slower, deeper, repeating one word, over and over, until the battery died. That word was not Latin, nor Maltese, but close. Solarum. No translation, no known origin, but similar to the old root for sun and for sleep. She emerged at dawn, eyes unfocused, hands cold. She spoke little afterward, retired within the year, donated her research anonymously. But one note appeared on the last page of her journal. Do not wake what sleeps in sound. Do not speak the sun into stone. Let the hum hold them. Let the tone bind them. Only silence keeps them dreaming. Malta's temples stretch beyond the hypogeum. Above ground stone circles rise like frozen echoes. Najdra, Hagar Kim, Gantija, aligned to stars, to solstices, to something older. Some believe they were part of a larger network, built to contain, to resonate, to keep the island in balance. One above, one below, voice above, silence below. But in the hypogeum, that balance thins. Because here, stone does not forget. Here, sound becomes memory. Memory becomes form. And form, once stirred, does not always sleep again. So if you find yourself in Malta walking its limestone paths and feel a vibration through your feet that does not match your heartbeat, if you speak and the echo returns not your words, but a whisper in a voice not your own, If you dream of stone figures watching with eyes closed yet seeing, stay above. Let the breath stay buried, because some temples are not for worship, some halls are not for echo, and some statues are not sleeping. They are listening. It begins in silence, the kind of silence that follows something old and terrible, the kind that clings to stone, that settles into ash, that remembers every name ever burned from it. In the southern ruins of ancient Samaria, where the land turns to cracked dust and the sun carves shadows sharper than blades, lies the forgotten city of Ur, a city once ruled by kings who spoke to gods and built ziggurats that touched the sky, a city that rose with the river and bowed to the stars. But beneath its temples and broken streets, something else was found, something sealed, something scorched, something still warm. In 1922, as archaeologist Leonard Woolley unearthed the Royal Cemetery of Ur, he uncovered not only gold and relics, but patterns, burned chambers, sealed altars, stone vaults beneath shrines that should have held offerings. Instead, they held bone, dry, cracked, charred, but clean. No soot, no ash, no residue of fire, as if the flames had come from within, as if the heat had not touched the walls. Only the body. Clay tablets recovered nearby told fragments of a ritual lost to time. They spoke of a nameless god, one with no image, no temple, no idol, only heat, only fire, only ash. They called it the devourer without smoke, the flame beneath sand, the one who breathes through stone, the ritual named in trembling cuneiform, the rite of ashen fire. Unlike other Mesopotamian deities who demanded grain or wine or animals, this one asked for something stranger: silence, solitude, and flame lit and sealed dark. The chamber must be closed. The air must not enter, and the voice must not break. A single chant repeated once, then never again. The one who lit the fire was never named, because afterward, there was nothing left to name. Woolley's team recorded over 17 sealed altars across the site, all identical, small stone cells built beneath larger temples, always unmarked, always hidden, each one opened the same way. Stone plug removed, stale air rushing out. Inside, bones burned to brittle charcoal, arranged in a kneeling position, skulls facing downward, hands pressed together, no tools, no debris. Only heat marks on the floor directly beneath them, as if they had combusted, without fuel, without flame, without breath. Scientists tested the remains, expecting signs of intense external fire, but the evidence suggested internal ignition. Bones shattered from within, as though pressure built inside, exploded silently. No burn marks on walls, no signs of smoke, only char and silence. In 2008, a team revisited one of these chambers with modern equipment. They resealed the room with high-grade oxygen sensors. The readings confirmed what no one believed. The combustion occurred in vacuum. No oxygen, no fire, just heat. Intense, targeted, instantaneous. They repeated the tests. No result matched what had occurred. No known reaction could explain the condition of the bones. The chambers remain a mystery, but not just for their physics, for their presence, their weight. One researcher reported a strange vibration near the sealed door, a low hum, not mechanical, not electrical, but deep, physical, felt in the chest. The moment he touched the stone, it stopped. Another described the sensation of being watched from within the chamber, not by a ghost, not by memory, but by something listening. Still, waiting, and warm, always warm. Further translations of the tablets revealed darker stories, of cities burned without flame, of men who vanished in smoke that left no stain, of a God who lived in breath not in body, whose name was not spoken but exhaled, a sound not written but remembered, a word that meant burn without fire, and without light, a word lost, or buried, perhaps on purpose. A single phrase appears repeatedly across different tablets, sometimes scratched hastily in margins, sometimes etched with precision. The phrase reads, "The fire sees the soul before the body burns." Some believe this refers to a purification, others to a judgment, but none understand how. Only that the bones found in UR bear no signs of struggle, no damage from weapons, no restraint. They knelt, they bowed, they burned, and they never screamed. Local legends near Tel El Makayar still speak of cursed stone, of old wind that carries heat without flame. Farmers avoid digging too deep. Children are warned not to whisper into wells, because some say the God still listens, still breathes through the bones of the earth, still waits for the right to begin again. And in the museum archives of Baghdad, a clay tablet remains untranslated, its symbols distorted, melted at the edges, as if exposed to fire without burning. Even today its surface is warm, slightly, consistently, as though the script within still remembers, still smolders. And what it says, no one dares to speak aloud, not in the daylight, and never at night, because the burning god of UR was not worshipped. It was feared, it was served, and it was sealed. But seals fail, and rituals return, especially the ones meant to be forgotten. Some gods do not rise from the sky. They rise from the soil, from breath caught beneath the stone, from chambers sealed in heat and silence. In the ruins of UR where memory sleeps in clay, and dust coats every sacred name, a forgotten ritual once left behind, only scorched bone and closed air. No incense, no altar flame, only heat, unseen, uncontrolled, and possibly unstoppable. In 2015, a private team of researchers from an undisclosed institution returned to the southern edge of UR, following a satellite anomaly that showed increased thermal signatures in an unexcavated quadrant. There was no power grid, no sunlight reaching that depth, only dry earth and collapsed tunnels. Still, the heat remained constant, localized, low, but steady, like something breathing in rhythm with the land. They unearthed a vault sealed in limestone and blackened mortar, its surface etched with shallow grooves resembling wave patterns. None of the glyphs matched known Sumerian script, but one symbol appeared again and again, a spiral enclosed in a square, its center filled with thousands of needle marks like a burn repeated by trembling hands. When the vault was opened, the air inside rushed outward with no scent, no smoke, no dust, but heavy, thick, warm, like breath exhaled after waiting far too long. Inside lay a single altar, a stone table no larger than a coffin slab. On it, a skeleton, kneeling, head bowed, arms outstretched, the ribs collapsed inward, the spine fractured at the base. Yet no signs of crushing, only burn, direct, surgical. The stone beneath the bones was black, but not charred, melted, as if the fire had come from within the body and sunk downward. The walls were smooth, untouched, no soot, no streaks, only one mark above the altar, a handprint, pressed into the stone, still warm when found, not carved, not painted, impressed, as if made in molten rock, fused instantly, and perfectly human in size. The team brought in thermal cameras. Within hours their devices failed. 3 batteries exploded. 2 screens cracked without pressure. The generator shorted in silence. No sparks, only heat. And within the hour, the walls began to hum. Soft, low, not audible at first, only felt, like tension rising in the chest before a scream. One of the researchers collapsed. No fever, no trauma, only whispers as he fell. His final words recorded by a field mic left open. The fire is awake. The god breathes from beneath. Let the bones be hollow. Let the voice be flame. Then silence, and static, and heat. They sealed the vault again. Left no trace, but the data was preserved. The audio files examined, and one frequency stood out, measured at 4.3 hertz. Infrasound, below human hearing, but felt, known to trigger unease, disorientation, visions, and worse, when played back. Test subjects reported sweating, hallucinations, dreams of burning cities, of red skies, of kneeling figures staring with hollow eyes into walls that whispered back. Some cried, some laughed. One lost consciousness, murmuring a phrase never taught. A phrase later found in one of the oldest tablets recovered from the site. Breathe not for yourself. Speak not with your mouth. Let the flame name you, and forget what came before. There are records from the time of Babylon that mention echoes from the southern ziggurats, priests who refused to chant before certain stones, temples sealed not by kings, but by strangers dressed in ash, people who came only during eclipses, who entered ruins barefoot and left no footprints. One scroll found near Eridu depicts a figure wrapped in smoke offering a bowl of coals to a weeping crowd. No faces, only hands raised, in fear or in worship. The scroll ends with a black smear across the parchment. Not ink, not mold, tested later as high carbon soot, but from no known fuel. No match to wood, no match to oil, only bone. Modern archaeologists now refer to these chambers as thermic vaults, but the locals call them something else, the mouths of silence, because nothing ever echoes within them. Sound enters, but never returns, as if the walls absorb it, consume it, burn it. Some believe this is the god's breath, the hunger that never ceased, and the fire is only its voice. In the Museum of Basra, a fragment of a broken steel remains locked in a vault, not for preservation, but for safety. The fragment is said to radiate warmth regardless of climate. Visitors who stood too long near the glass complained of nosebleeds. One guard reported visions of red deserts and burning altars. He quit the same day. The steel bears no clear inscription, only a deep groove across its face, sliced clean through stone. A burn, smooth, cooled, final, as if the message had been spoken once and silenced forever. Legends say the god of Ur did not die. It was never born. It emerged from beneath, from within, a god without face, without temple, one who needed no prayers, only presence, only silence, only offering. And when the voice spoke once, the listener changed, turned to heat, to ash, to dust with no smoke. And now, the voice waits again. So if you walk the ruins of Ur and the wind grows warm though the sun has set, if the ground beneath your feet pulses softly in rhythm with your breath, if you find a chamber sealed not with bricks but with stillness, and the stone hums beneath your palm, do not enter, do not speak, do not light the fire, because some gods do not forgive, and some rituals were never meant to end. It begins with roots, thick ones that wrap around stone like fingers tightening, silent ones that pull walls into the earth, and thin ones that slip through cracks like whispers through teeth. Deep in the Cambodian jungle, far from the well-mapped grandeur of Angkor, what lies a stretch of forest few dare to name. Dense, low-lit, thick with insects and the scent of wet decay. It is not empty, but quiet, not abandoned, but watched. The locals call it Prey Tom Rome, the forest that swallows, the forest that feeds. Hidden in the overgrown hills of Phnom Kulen, where red earth bleeds through moss and broken temples lean against trees, stand the ruins of a shrine forgotten by time. Its stones are wide, flat, arranged in circles, low to the ground, altars carved not with gods, but with doors, open arches etched into stone, some filled with spiral patterns, others marked with empty space. Above them, one repeated inscription, barely legible, words that no one fully translates. But the meaning, they say, is this: return through offering, wake through memory, live through ash. The rite of returning. It was first rediscovered in 1981 by a group of geologists studying water movement along the Kulen Plateau. They noted unusual mineral deposits in the soil near the ruin, too rich, too dense, as if something beneath had fed the ground. When they returned to gather samples, their instruments failed, compasses spun, watches stopped, and one man collapsed, breath caught, eyes wide, heart still. He lived, but spoke only one word, Chantre, a name, unfamiliar, unrecorded, but found days later carved into one of the stone altars. Only once, as if spoken, then buried. Since then, archaeologists and researchers have returned, in small teams, brief visits, none overnight, Equipment malfunctions remain constant. Drones crash without cause. Batteries drain without warning. Lenses fog in dry air. More than once. Tools vanish. Left on the stone altars. Gone the next morning. No wind. No animal tracks. Just missing. And in their place, ash. Always fine. Always gray. And warm. Even when the air is cold. Some believe the altars were ceremonial. A place of death. A place of crossing. But others believe they were not meant to honor the dead. They were meant to bind them, to hold them, or worse, to bring them back. The rite of returning was not a farewell. It was an invitation, a summoning, and the forest still listens. Local stories speak of monks who once lived among the ruins, keepers of the doors, voices of the dead. Their chants were quiet, low, never sung, only breathed. Some say they slept on stone, surrounded by ash, waiting, always waiting. When the temple fell, they remained, but not in body, in root, in soil, their breath woven into vines, their names grown into bark. The jungle here grows strangely, faster, thicker. Trees twist into shapes unnatural. Some split open at the base like mouths. Others lean in toward the altars, as if listening, as if feeding. And always, the same moss returns. Dark green, sticky, impossible to scrape away. It clings to names carved in stone, covering them, erasing them, until the name is gone, and the stone is hollow, as if memory itself is consumed. In 2009, a small team entered the site with a digital mapping unit. Their goal was to create a 3D reconstruction of the temple layout. They brought drones, high-frequency scanners, fresh batteries. They mapped for 6 hours, recorded a complete digital model. Then the data was lost. Not corrupted, gone. The files erased themselves on return. The hard drives melted from within. Circuit boards fused. No heat damage. No external sign. Only the drives. Burned. Quietly. And in the recovered footage from one drone, only 2 frames remained. Both dark. Foggy. But visible. Figures. Not standing. Not walking. But growing. From the altars. Upward. Human in shape. Rooted. Headless. Motionless. A temple priest in a nearby village keeps a bundle of white cords hidden in a wooden box. Each one tied in 7 knots. Each one burned at the ends. He says they are prayers for those who return without asking. He says the forest must be kept hungry, or it begins to reach. Through dream, through shadow, through memory. And when it reaches far enough, it does not take. It trades. The rite of returning was not a myth, not a parable. It was a system, an exchange. The living offered breath, and the dead gave memory. The dead came closer, but never alone. And each altar, each stone door, was a gate, built not for entry, but for return. One that could be opened, but not closed. There are caves beneath the ruin, small, winding, barely wide enough to crawl. They descend at strange angles, and one, only one, is carved with steps, shallow, unfinished, leading down into wet black. It is said that once, a boy disappeared inside, looking for his sister. She had wandered too far. Gone by morning, he never returned. But sometimes, at dusk, a voice can be heard from the cave mouth, whispering her name. From below, not with fear, but with hunger. And still, the altars stand, overgrown, silent, waiting, their carvings worn, their names fading, but not forgotten, because the forest remembers, the roots remember, the ash remembers, and when the wind dies, when the night deepens, they whisper the names again, softly, in a tongue only stone recalls. And always, one phrase remains: return is not a gift. Return is a debt. There are places that do not simply remember the dead. They require them, feed on them, grow around them. In the jungle ruins of Phnom Kulen, among the sunken altars and rotting steps, the forest does not sleep. It watches. It listens. It waits. The rite of returning was not meant to honor life. It was designed to bend it, to pull the spirit back through the soil, not into memory, but into presence, to call back breath, and to trade it for something else. In 2021, an international excavation team, led by a Cambodian-born researcher named Kima Dara, returned to the ruins with permission to uncover a section long buried under centuries of collapsed forest. The area had been marked as unstable, ignored by previous teams, but satellite imaging showed geometric shapes beneath the moss, a pattern not natural, stone laid in triangles, too perfect, too consistent. At the center, a depression filled with thick black vines. They called it the throat. It opened without digging, soft earth falling away like breath held too long, revealing stone beneath, not smooth, but ribbed, like vertebrae, stacked, bent, leading down. The first day was quiet. Birds returned. Sunlight broke through. Nothing unusual. On the second, one of the crew fell ill. He claimed he heard his own name in the wind. Not once, but repeatedly. Low, familiar, wrong. On the third, their translator fled. She refused to explain. Only wept. Only repeated one phrase. The names come back hungry. By the fourth day, they had cleared the mouth of the depression. What they found was not a room, not a tunnel, but a shape. Circular, layered, stone ribs curving inward, each carved with names. Hundreds, thousands, many repeated, some incomplete, as if erased mid-carving. One inscription stood alone at the center, carved into a flat black stone, a single spiral, and beneath it, a line of text, not in Khmer, not in Sanskrit, but older, curved, flowing, translated roughly into 6 words. The dead calls from under breath. The next morning equipment failed. Every device, cameras, radios, batteries, dead. Only the microphones worked, and they recorded nothing. No wind, no insects, no voices, only a low hum, constant, unwavering, and beneath it, breath, shallow, ragged, not near, but everywhere, as if the jungle itself exhaled through the ruins. Slowly, deliberately, and with purpose. Kima kept a journal. Her final entry was found outside the throat, written in pencil, wet, torn, but legible. It read, "We found something. It was not buried. It was kept. The spiral is not symbol. It is lock, or leash. It loops inward until it opens. And once it opens, nothing sleeps again." 3 members of the team vanished. No trace, no signs of struggle. Their gear remained, tents undisturbed, clothing untouched. Only a trail of small black stones left in the soil behind each disappearance. Cold to the touch, smooth, some carved with partial names, some blank. One placed in the palm of Kima's left hand, fingers curled around it in her sleep. She did not remember picking it up. She did not remember sleeping, but her hand would not open. When they left the site, the jungle returned quickly. The vines covered the stones. The altars vanished beneath moss. The wind grew silent, as if the forest exhaled once, then swallowed itself whole. And the throat sealed again, not with collapse, but with growth. Roots twisting over ribs, moss layering over carvings, darkness closing inward like an ice shedding beneath flesh. Years before this expedition, a monk from a nearby monastery wrote of a dream. He walked through the ruins at night, alone, moonless. The forest was still. He reached the altars and found them glowing, not with light, but with breath. Each stone rose, not lifted, but standing. Figures formed from root and ash, not alive, not dead, but waiting. He asked who they were. One turned, without face, without sound. It placed a finger to the spiral, and he woke, choking, his hand covered in fine gray dust, and a single word carved into the wood beside his bed. Chantre. The name appears again and again across local myth. A woman, a priestess, a keeper of thresholds, said to have performed the first rite of returning, not to bring back a loved one, but herself. She carved her name into every altar, so that when her soul returned, it would know the way. But the ritual fractured. Something else came back. Something that wore her voice, but not her memory. Something that needed names. To stay, to feed, to live. Through others. In the village nearest the ruins, a girl disappeared in 2014. She had wandered to the river alone. By morning she was gone. 3 days later she returned. Dry, silent, eyes open, but not seeing. She walked into the temple and sat, still, smiling. When asked where she had gone, she answered, "I remembered my name." Then she slept, and never woke again. Her breath shallow, steady, but her eyes never moved. She remains there, alive, unchanged, but wrong, like something paused, or listening. The final altar uncovered by Kima's team differed from the rest. It bore no carvings, no spiral, only a basin, shallow, round, filled with fine gray dust. When disturbed, the dust reformed each night, smooth, perfect, like water settling after stone falls in. When Kima placed her hand inside, she gasped. The dust was cold, not with temperature, but with absence. She pulled away, and the outline of her hand remained, pressed deep, refusing to fade. Still visible when they left, still there in the last photograph taken. Her handprint, fingers curled inward, as if grasping, as if calling. The forest still grows over the ruins, still hums when the sky darkens, still breathes when no one listens. They say the rite of returning is no longer performed, because it never truly ended. The altars remain, the names fade, and the spirals turn, inward, always inward, like mouths, waiting to speak, waiting to open, waiting for breath, not to give, but to take. So if you walk near Phnom Kilin and hear your name spoken in windless air, if you see stones move not with force but with breath, if you dream of roots wrapping around bone, do not turn back, do not speak, and above all, do not step into the spiral, because in this forest, the dead do not rest. They return, but not alone. Before the birds stir, before the frost melts from the grass, before the sun crests the edge of the eastern sky, the wind moves first, slow, low, and humming, across the vast steppes of Kazakhstan where the land stretches in silence and shadow. A sound rolls over the earth, like breath through hollow bone. It moves without pattern, but finds its rhythm when it meets the stones, hundreds of them, placed with care, positioned in circles, ovals, crosses, geometries not random, but exact, so large they cannot be seen from the ground, only from above. They are called the Turgay circles, named for the remote region they haunt. The first was spotted in 1987 by a Soviet pilot flying at low altitude. At first he thought it a natural formation, a coincidence of boulders and grass, but then he saw the second, then the third, then more, aligned, measured, deliberate. They stretch over the Kazakh plains, covering hundreds of kilometers, marked by no settlements, touched by no modern hands. Even local shepherds keep their distance. They call them the wind graves, places where breath goes, but does not return. Archaeologists first reached the site in the early 90s, expecting burial mounds. They found none. No bones, no ash, no tools, only stones, laid flat, some stacked, some buried halfway, all perfectly weathered, as though placed at the same moment, and left untouched. When they attempted to dig beneath, their instruments failed. Ground-penetrating radar returned only static. Compasses spun. Radios crackled with unknown frequencies. And every watch stopped at the same minute. 4:13. Not morning, not evening, but both. Twilight from both ends. Researchers tried to record the hum. They brought microphones, high-frequency sensors, low-frequency tuners, but the sound would not register, except once, at dawn, in the exact center of the largest circle, as the light first touched the eastern arc. A vibration, faint, but rising. The recording captured no melody, only a tone, layered, growing, as if the stone itself breathed in, and just before it vanished, one modulation, a second tone, in harmony, No known wind pattern could recreate it. No instrument could mimic it. And the microphones burned out. The locals say the circles were made before the sky broke, before names were given to stars, when the breath of the world rose from the stones, and men could speak to it. They say the circles are not markers, not graves, but mouths that open only when the air is still enough to listen. Some believe they were meant for the gods of the sky, deities of sound, of air, of passage, and return. Others believe they were left by those who came before, not ancestors, but strangers, travelers, who understood the wind's language and shaped the earth to speak it back. One pattern among the circles repeats, always 5 rings, always concentric, each ring composed of smaller stones, evenly spaced, no breaks, no gaps. In the center, nothing, just space. In 2003, a geophysicist stood inside that central point, alone, just before sunrise. He closed his eyes and heard nothing. Then, movement, not of air, but of ground, not shaking, but breathing. He said the soil beneath him exhaled, warm, dry, carrying no scent, only pressure. He opened his eyes, and the stones around him were vibrating, not visibly, not shifting, but humming, so quietly, it made the bones in his wrist ache. Later, he lost all hearing in his right ear. Doctors found no damage, but sounds no longer reached him from that side, only a low tone, constant, unchanging. He described it as the memory of wind, as if part of the circle stayed inside. There are over 50 known geoglyphs across the Turgay region, many undiscovered until satellite scans revealed their shape. They appear ancient, older than the Bronze Age, older than writing, possibly older than memory. But no tools were ever found, no signs of habitation, no burial remains, only the stone and the silence. A radio technician once brought equipment to test frequency distortion near the circles. He stayed outside the largest ring, away from the center, but his radios picked up interference, not noise, but signal, a repeated pulse. 11 seconds, then nothing, then again. It lasted for 7 minutes, then stopped. The next morning, his equipment would not turn on. He took the radio home. It worked again, but once, only once. It played back a recording, one not stored on tape, not captured, but remembered. A voice, not speaking, but humming, low, melancholy, unfamiliar. There's one circle no longer mapped, the 41st, larger than the rest, but broken, not by erosion, but by force. A line of stone shattered, cracked as if something erupted from beneath. No vegetation grows inside the ring, only dust. Even snow avoids its surface, melting before it settles. A single shepherd crossed the boundary once, following a lost animal. He returned days later, shoes gone, eyes unfocused. He could not speak for 6 weeks, only hum, each night, the same note, until one morning, he stopped and never made a sound again. The Kazakh government avoids discussing the circles. They are not marked as sacred, nor protected, but neither disturbed. Flights are routed around them, roads bend before reaching them, and in the local archives of a nearby village, there is an old map, hand-drawn, faded with water damage, that shows more circles, dozens, some beneath lakes, others beneath hills, and one, far north, larger than any discovered, its center marked with a spiral, and the word beneath it, breath. The wind continues to pass over the steppes each dawn, whistling, moaning, and sometimes singing, not for ears, but for stones, because the stones remember what the wind forgets, and when the light strikes them just right, they hum back, not in sorrow, not in joy, but in presence, a sound that does not ask to be understood, only felt. Some things sing not with voice but with shape. Some sounds are not heard but remembered. They pass through stone, through soil, through silence, and they settle in places too wide for fences, too quiet for footsteps, too old for names. Beyond the plains of Turgay, Where the horizon curves like a closed eyelid, there lies a salt flat, colorless, flat, dry, and buried beneath it a circle no one recorded, no one mapped, no one acknowledged. It was found by accident. A satellite scanned in 2016, searching for mineral density, logged a geometric anomaly beneath the surface. A spiral, wide, precise, echoed by 3 faint rings around it, all equidistant, invisible to the eye, but perfect in the scan. The team that discovered it did not excavate. They listened. The wind on the salt flat moves differently. It rolls low, then rises abruptly, circles back, not playful, not chaotic, but patterned, each gust taking the same route, each breeze curving at the same arc. One engineer built a low-range directional mic. He placed it in the center of the spiral's mapped location, then waited. No movement, no insects, no birds, only a slow tension, like the pause before a song begins. Then it came. Not a hum, not a tone, but a harmony. 3 notes, stacked, breathing, each one deeper than the last, each one vibrating at the edge of perception. The ground beneath the mic warmed, not sharply, not suddenly, but gradually, as if breath returned to stone. The recorder captured 13 seconds, then shut down. The mic itself fused. The plastic warped. The wires curled in upon themselves. Inside the case, all batteries leaked, even the backup cells, all within seconds. They left the site the same day. The wind followed. For hours, they heard it through closed car windows, through radio static, through sleep. One researcher reported waking up to find the window of her hotel room cracked from the inside. No entry, no breeze, only a thin dusting of salt on the sill, and a circle drawn with one fingertip. In a storage vault in Astana, the original mic lies in a lead-lined drawer, still warm, still humming. No instruments placed inside that drawer have lasted more than one night. The walls collect condensation, but only in circles, perfect, unmoving, as if the resonance left inside the mic still wants to escape. Local legends speak of singing stones long before the Turgay circles were discovered. They say the earth spoke at dawn, not in words, but in breath, that the sky answered, and the space in between became holy. There were no temples, no shrines, only these patterns, etched in stone, built to hold the sound, to amplify it, to carry it forward. The elders do not call them circles. They call them doors, not to another place, but another time. They believe sound is memory, that the earth listens and speaks when the world grows too silent. A geologist named Malik Nurbay conducted a long-form acoustic survey of the largest known circle in 2019. He placed sensors around its perimeter. Nothing extraordinary occurred for 3 days. Then, at dawn, the sensors lit in perfect sequence, not from motion, not from vibration, but from pressure, invisible, pulsing, rotating, like breath moving through a lung. The pattern repeated every 11 minutes, for times, then stopped. Malik tried to replicate the readings. He could not, but each morning afterward, he found the central sensor displaced, not removed, just rotated slightly, always clockwise, by 22 degrees, until the 7th day, when it was gone. No prints, no marks, just absence, and in its place, a small stone, carved with concentric lines, and one shallow groove down the center, like a mouth. Sound engineers attempted to isolate the frequency of the circle hum. They failed, because it was not a single frequency. It was multiple, interlaced, living, shifting, as if the stones adapted, as if the song was listening. When played back in an anechoic chamber, the recorded tones did not echo. They bent, curved back toward the listener. Some reported feeling watched. Others became nauseous. One fainted. Every test subject described the same dream that night, standing in a wide field, circles of light around their feet, a wind rising behind them, and something ahead. Not a figure, not a beast, but a shape, unmoving, pulsing, and then waking, with dry soil beneath their tongue. The circles of Turgay are not navigational, not astronomical. They are not graves, not messages. They are instruments, and the wind is their player. But the melody is not made for us. It was made long ago, before language, before belief, when sky and stone were the same. In a locked drawer in a university basement lies a broken lens cap. It belonged to a drone that flew over the circles. The footage was corrupted, but one frame remained. It shows no people, no movement, just shadow, long, bending against the curve of the circle, as if cast by something unseen. The timestamp, 4:13, and in the lower right corner, a reflection, not of the drone, but of something beneath it, circular, open, as if the ground itself was looking up. To this day, no full excavation of the salt flat spiral has occurred. Permission denied. Weather unpredictable. Instruments fail before arrival. The wind remains constant. The hum returns each solstice, each equinox, and always, just before the sun rises, the sound bends toward the listener, not louder, but closer, as if someone, or something, is standing behind the breath, waiting, listening, responding, because some circles were not meant to be walked, some songs were not meant to be heard, and some sounds, when returned, do not fade. They grow, until silence becomes impossible, and every stone begins to hum. The Aegean Sea holds many secrets, some buried beneath the foam of forgotten tides, some crumbled into dust on sun-bleached cliffs. But there is one island, unmarked, unnamed, that the locals only call the Hollow Place. It does not appear on most maps, and those who know of it rarely speak. They say the wind there carries no salt, only silence, and sometimes voices, not screaming, not whispering, but waiting. The island rises out of the water like a broken tooth, jagged, pale, uninviting. No trees grow on its rocky surface, only lichen and black moss, the kind that clings to stone and seems to breathe at dusk. At its center, hidden beneath layers of earth and time, lies a chamber, circular, windowless, built from blocks too large for the narrow paths that lead to it, a structure carved inward rather than raised, as if the builders hollowed the island itself to make space for something sacred or something dangerous. The temple has no name, no markings, no dedications to gods or rulers, no myth, no memory, just stone, smooth, unbroken, cold even in summer. When archaeologists first entered the site in 1964, they found the air inside strangely still, not stale, but thick, like it had been held, preserved, unwilling to leave. Their lights flickered, their voices echoed, but not after they spoke. Before, each word, each breath, each step, reflected back at them, split seconds too early, as if the walls remembered sound and released it out of order. Deeper inside, they found the bones. Not many, only 23, laid in a perfect arc, spines curled toward the center, arms crossed over hollow chests. No skulls, not one, only the bodies, headless, silent, but posed with care, as if in worship or surrender. The stone beneath them was stained, dark, rust-colored, but not with blood. No organic material remained, only trace elements, iron, calcium, char, like the bodies had not decayed, but been burned. Inward, there was no altar, no fire pit, no carvings to suggest ritual, but the shape of the chamber, the curve of the walls, the tilt of the floor toward the center, suggested purpose. Sound moved strangely here. It bounced, it bent, it hummed. One researcher whistled once, softly, nervous, and the echo came back, twice, first too early, then again, deeper, lower, as if another voice followed the first, mimicking it, slower, hungrier. They did not whistle again. The bones were carbon dated to 1800 BCE, but the temple itself, older. No one knows how much older. The rock has been reshaped too many times by salt wind, by erosion, by silence. But the smoothness, the engineering, suggests pre-Greek, pre-Minoan, maybe even pre-language. Some scholars proposed it was a sanctuary, a place for the unclaimed dead, those without family, without legacy, without name. But others disagreed. They pointed to the missing heads, the ritual curve of the bodies, the acoustics that predicted sound, and they whispered one question: what if this was not built to honor the forgotten, but to erase them? In a report that was never published, one archaeologist wrote of a night spent alone in the chamber. He stayed after dark, recording notes, testing sound reverberation. He brought with him a tuning fork, struck it against the wall. The tone echoed back. Wrong, not dissonant, but altered, shortened, like it had been cut mid-vibration, swallowed, and replaced with something else. He left the chamber shortly after, never returned to the island, and months later, he left the field entirely. His notes ended with a single sentence: some places remember more than we do, and they do not forgive. There is a local story, told only by the very old, of sailors who landed on the island in search of shelter. A storm had driven them off course, their sails torn, their compass spinning. They found the hollow temple, dry, unmarked, strangely warm despite the night. They entered, built a small fire near the center, ate, laughed, rested. One of them, a young man, spoke a name aloud, not his own, not one known to any of them. He didn't know why. It simply came. The others laughed. Then they heard it, the name, spoken back, from the wall, from the air, from inside, not echoed, repeated. And then, the fire died, one by one. Their voices vanished, not their breath, not their movement, only their sound, until they sat in complete silence, mouths moving, eyes wide, but no noise. The next morning, the ship drifted ashore on the mainland, empty. Only clothes remained, laid in a circle, dry, still warm. The silence of the island is not peaceful. It is dense, heavy, layered, as if hundreds of voices were buried there, not dead, not resting, but held. And the temple, not a tomb, but a vault, built not to contain death, but the act of forgetting itself, and the cost of memory. Even now, satellite scans show distortions over the site, temperature anomalies, faint vibrations, nothing constant, nothing strong, but always, at the same time, dawn, when the first light touches the sea, and the shadows inside the temple begin to stir. They say names are powerful, that to speak one is to give it shape, to give it life, to bring it back. So what happens when a name is taken, not lost, but removed, erased from stone, from voice, from time? Does it disappear? Or does it wait, somewhere deep, somewhere beneath, where the stones still hum, and the echoes move before the words do? It was in the second descent when the acoustics changed. Not subtly, not in tone or volume, but in presence. The researchers had returned after decades, a newer team, equipped with technology that should have silenced mystery. But what they carried in logic, they lacked in caution. They brought with them directional microphones, laser mapping tools, thermal scanners, and names. Each introduced themselves aloud before entering, as if declaring presence would protect them. Inside the chamber, nothing welcomed them, yet nothing resisted either. The walls remained smooth, the air remained still, but sound no longer echoed. It anticipated. Words once spoken returned in fractured syllables, sometimes before the breath, sometimes after the lips. Every sound fragmented, reassembled, like someone was listening too closely, like someone was trying to learn how to speak again. They placed a microphone at the center of the chamber, the same curve where the headless bodies once rested. They left it recording overnight, sealed the room, watched from above via thermal sensors. No movement, no change. But in the morning, the recording played something they could not explain. First, silence. Then, a voice, not one of theirs. Low, breathy, unclear. It did not speak. It mimicked each researcher's name, spoken in broken order, spoken without pause, spoken like prayer or warning, and behind each name, a sound like stone dragging across stone. Slow, measured, repetitive, as if something crawled in circles, looking for a way out. The team's lead linguist, a woman named Liana from Thessaloniki, began to isolate the syllables. She played them in reverse, in fragments, slowed, filtered. She believed there was a pattern, not language, but structure, like sound trying to rebuild memory. She called it resonance recursion. The chamber did not echo. It recorded. It held the shape of voices and whispered them back in pieces. She spent 3 days alone inside the temple, mapping frequencies, repeating words, measuring delay. Each night, she dreamed of corridors inside the stone, passages that bent backward, opening to chambers that had no ceiling, only sky. She walked through them in silence, but felt breath on her neck. Each time she turned, nothing stood there but her own name, written in ash on the wall. In the dream, she never said it aloud. She always woke before the echo returned. On the final night, Liana did not return to camp. They found her asleep, inside the curve, eyes closed, breathing steady, but her voice, gone. No injury, no trauma. She simply would not speak. Not from fear, not from refusal, but from emptiness. When they tried to lift her, she began to hum. A low note, monotone, unbroken. It vibrated through the chamber, matched its acoustics, and something in the stone answered back. Not louder, but deeper. Not sound, but memory. They evacuated the island. Liana remained in care for months. She began to speak again, but not in Greek, not in English. The language was unknown, curved, fluid, unfamiliar, until a linguist recognized a symbol. A fragment of script carved on a clay shard in western Anatolia, found in a burial site, never translated. It matched the tone of her humming, the fragment's placement, under a skull that was not the body's own. They began to wonder if the island temple, the chamber without names, was not meant to erase, but to hold. A sanctuary, not for the living, but for voice, for memory stripped of identity, for words that could no longer belong. It held them, rebuilt them, fed them through stone, and spoke them back through those who listened too long. One audio engineer played the temple recording at low volume while asleep. He dreamed of a figure standing beneath water, motionless, lips moving. No sound emerged, but the water around it pulsed. He woke with blood on his pillow. Both eardrums ruptured. Doctors said no trauma was present, just absence, as if his ears forgot how to hear. Another scientist ran spectral analysis on the frequency range of the early echoes. She found harmonics outside normal parameters, ultra-low, unstable. When converted into visual waveforms, they resembled spirals, perfectly balanced, each tone completing a full revolution, then splitting. 2 paths, one ascending, one falling, like voices choosing direction, like memory dividing. One final experiment was attempted. A sealed speaker placed at the center of the chamber. It played only one phrase, an old funerary chant recovered from Mycenaean tombs. Not an invocation, but a release. The speaker ran for 7 minutes, then stopped. The chamber remained quiet, but the camp outside began to experience sound anomalies. Radios chirped with fragments of the chant. Rain tapped in rhythmic patterns. Even footsteps echoed differently, as if the world around the island had been reshaped, not visibly, but audibly. By morning, the speaker was gone, not broken, not removed, just not present, and the circle where it stood, now marked by fine ash, perfectly drawn into the spiral of the chamber's stone pattern. They say Liana still dreams of corridors, still speaks in the language no one understands. She never answers questions, never breaks the spiral rhythm of her words. She listens more than she speaks, tilting her head toward spaces with no voice, as if someone still speaks to her. From beneath, from behind, from before, the island remains closed. Its name still unknown, the chamber still sealed, But fishermen nearby say they hear voices when the fog rolls in, not from above, not from the water, but from within the stone itself. Words not in any tongue, but heavy, mournful, half-remembered, like a name you almost recognize, just before waking. Some say it was a sanctuary for the forgotten, others, a vault for voices lost to time. But the hum inside, the breathless echo, the sound that moves before you speak, it suggests something older, something patient, not dead, not gone, just waiting, for silence, for breath, for someone to speak the wrong name, and let the forgotten speak it back. The sand moves like memory, slow, relentless. Layer by layer it buries time itself, and beneath it, in the heart of the empty quarter, lie the bones of kings, not in tombs, not beneath palaces, but in pits, shallow, circular, facing the sky, and in each, a mirror of black stone, positioned with care, still angled toward where the sun once died. They were not buried by others. They were buried alive, and they chose it, the empty quarter, Rub al-Khali, the vastest stretch of unbroken desert on earth. No rivers, no shadows, only wind and silence, and heat so heavy, it hums against your teeth. For centuries, no one believed people once lived here. No cities, no script, no walls. But then came the ruins, found by accident, after a sandstorm uncovered the corner of a platform, polished, uncracked, cut from a single slab. It led to more, a wide circle of stone, etched with spirals, and lined with holes, each one perfectly cut, each one deep enough for a body. They called it the sky pit, not a burial ground, but a ritual space. Charred soil suggested fire, but not for warmth. The bones found within bore no weapon marks, no decay, just pressure, as if crushed by time, or by silence. And every skull was plated in gold, thin sheets, pressed over bone, stamped with symbols no one recognized. Not letters, not numbers, just lines, radiating outward, like rays, like stars. At the center of the platform, a disk of obsidian, black, cold, unblemished, positioned at a slight angle, tilted to reflect the sun only at noon. During eclipse, when the sky dies, and light becomes shadow, it faces upward still, a mirror for something above, or something below. An inscription was found along the rim, worn, barely visible, but carved deep. Not in Arabic, not in any known Semitic tongue. It was a language of light and silence. But one line translated clearly: to burn the breath is to rise among fire. To sleep awake is to shine forever. They were not mourned, these kings. They were offered, not to gods, but to the stars themselves. Rulers, sacrificed not in shame, but in glory, placed beneath the dying sun, so their souls would pass through fire and enter the sky, not in myth, but in metal. Their remains coated in gold, their hearts dried in stone, their names lost beneath the wind. The first pit held a single skeleton, fully intact, positioned on its back, hands folded, the ribs shattered from within, not broken, but expanded, as if the chest pushed outward. One final breath, held too long. Beneath the skull, a ring of ash, still black. No source of fire found, just ash, and dust, and silence. Another pit, smaller, held two sets of bones, one adult, one child, both with golden mouths, molten at the edges, as if sealed shut. Above them, the stone was scorched, not from above, but from within. The temperature required to burn stone could not have come from outside. No torch, no furnace. It rose, it consumed, and left nothing but shadow. The orientation of each pit follows the sky, one to Orion, another to Sirius, a third to an unnamed cluster, all alignments perfect. Even now, thousands of years later, no deviation, no drift, as if the desert itself remembers and will not allow forgetting. One mirror, found cracked, reflected nothing, but when light passed over its surface, a mark appeared, circular, Like an eye, a ring of fire etched into shadow. The mark faded as the sun set, but returned with every eclipse. No matter where the mirror was moved, it followed the sky. A geologist on the team once stayed through twilight, alone, watching the mirror as darkness rose. He heard something beneath the platform. Not movement, not speech, but breath. Slow, measured, like wind through bone. He placed his hand against the stone and felt heat, faint, but real, pulsing, not from the air, but from below, like something remembered, like something waiting. He did not return the next day. He left the dig without word, donated his notes, refused payment, and never spoke of the site again. His final entry was scrawled in red ink across a torn map. The sun watches. The gold listens. We are not meant to reflect back. The practice vanished without record. No texts, no stories, no graves, just gold bones, black mirrors, and pits that whisper in the wind. But the precision remains. The alignments endure, even when all else is gone, as if the ritual was never forgotten, only paused, waiting for the right shadow to fall again, waiting for the final sun. The desert does not sleep. It waits, and when the sky dims, and the sun folds in on itself, the sand remembers. It was during the eclipse of 2020 when the next pit was found, buried deep beneath the original platform, unearthed not by tools, but by movement. The wind rose, then fell, and when it passed, a single crack split the center stone. Beneath it, a shaft, narrow, descending at a perfect angle, exactly 23 degrees east of celestial south. The same tilt used by ancient observatories in Anatolia, the same tilt mirrored in the oldest ziggurats of Mesopotamia. A passage built not for people, but for light. The shaft led to a chamber, octagonal, polished, walls lined with inlaid metal veins. Not gold, not silver, something darker, unclassified. They carried no torches, only soft lamps, but the walls caught the glow and twisted it, made it move, as if reflecting memories, not light. At the chamber's center, a throne, carved from red limestone, etched with spiral paths, and seated atop a hollow pedestal. Inverted, a mirror buried beneath it, face down, face hidden. When they lifted the throne, dust poured outward in a slow exhale. No bones, no jewelry, no offering, only the mirror, still cold, still whole, but different. Not obsidian, not stone, something else entirely. It shimmered, even in shadow, even in silence. When turned upright, the air changed. Compasses spun, radios hissed. The sun passed overhead, and the mirror remained dark. But when it reached zenith, when the light stood still, the mirror opened, not with sound, not with flame, but with reflection. Each person in the room saw a different face, not theirs, not known, but familiar, as if remembered from a dream never spoken aloud. The kind of dream that fades before you wake, but stays beneath the ribs. One archaeologist dropped her camera. It struck the floor. No sound came. She picked it up, pressed record. Nothing. No playback. Only static shaped like breath. One geophysicist began humming. Soft, unaware. She said the tone came from below, not into her ears, but through her feet. It followed the angles of the room, moved through the veins in the wall, and echoed once, only once, before vanishing. But her boots left ash prints when she stepped back. No burn, no heat, just dust that matched the same found beneath the gold-plated skulls. Identical. The throne had inscriptions beneath the seat, hidden for centuries, scratched with bone or claw, not etched, desperate. One word repeated, across every surface. Rough, broken, but legible. Ascend. Not a command, a promise, or a price. A later scan of the region revealed 5 other substructures, each aligned to a different solstice, each buried deeper, each untouched, except for one, the farthest, the faintest, marked only by a subtle distortion in the sand, like breath paused mid-sentence. They reached it in silence. No digging required, The wind did it for them, as if the desert itself wanted it known. Beneath that final mound, a stone laid flat, black, veined, carved with concentric rings spiraling inward to a single point. A socket, empty. Something once rested there. Not a gem, not a seal, but a tool, a key. And beneath it all, a pit, deeper than the rest, wider, lined with metal that does not rust, walls that resist heat, and at its bottom, nothing, no bones, no ashes, just a mirror, cracked in a perfect starburst, and still humming, faint, endless, like a song held too long in a closed mouth. One desert guide who stood at the edge of that pit refused to go farther. He stepped back, removed his boots, and whispered a prayer, not in Arabic, not in any tongue his companions understood. His eyes rolled white. He hummed the same tone from the first throne, then turned and walked into the sun. They found no trace of him, only footprints that stopped mid-step, as if he had been lifted or unmade. The kings of the desert did not seek to rule forever. They sought to leave, not in body, but in light, to join the fire above, not as myth, but as presence. Each eclipse a door, each sacrifice a signal, gold to hold the soul, mirrors to reflect its release, and stone to remember the silence that followed. The rituals ceased, but the sky did not forget. Even now, on certain eclipses, the wind over the empty quarter stops, the air stills, the birds vanish, and the sand hums, not loud, not fierce, but steady, waiting, remembering, calling. One astronomer charted the mirror alignments across 4 eclipses. They formed a map, not of Earth, not of constellations, but of sound, each pit marking a frequency, each throne a harmonic anchor. Together, a song, unfinished, incomplete, missing only one note. One more eclipse, one final throne, one last breath. The desert kings knew their names would not last. They burned them away, melted them into gold, etched them into silence. But their ritual was not for history. It was for return, to rise as fire, to become not stars, but the spaces between them, the darkness that holds their shape, the light that forgets how to shine, until called again. In the next eclipse, when the sun folds behind its shadow, and the mirror beneath the throne turns upward once more, perhaps the final sacrifice will rise. Perhaps the desert will sing, not in language, not in pain, but in light and silence, together, for the first time, and the last. The path into the Carpathians is not marked by signs, only by the way the forest leans. Branches twist away from the wind, roots clutch tightly to forgotten stones, and silence stretches between trees like cobweb. It is not an ordinary silence. It breathes. It watches, beyond the ridgelines, where no road dares climb, where no village claims the earth. There rests a monastery, carved into stone, walled in snow, hidden from the world by time and by choice. Locals call it Monasteria Lacrimiler, the Monastery of Tears, and in its oldest wing, sealed for nearly 600 years, there's a room with no name, known only by whispers, the Veil Room. Its door is made from a single slab of dark oak. No hinges, no handle, only a narrow vertical split, worn by centuries of silence. When it was forced open in the spring of 1911, dust poured out like breath held too long. Thick, heavy, sweet with rot, and something older. What lay inside was not decay, but devotion, frozen in time. The walls were red, not painted, but stained. Crimson frescoes reached from floor to ceiling, depicting 9 kneeling figures, cloaked, faceless, positioned in a crescent around a dark sphere. The sphere did not shimmer like gold, nor shine like silver. It absorbed light, a perfect black sun. Every figure knelt before it, hands clasped, heads bowed, and though none had eyes, they all faced the center. The frescoes were not signed, not dated, but analysis of the pigment revealed something strange. No known mineral matched the hue. Not ochre, not blood, not rust. The red glowed faintly in candlelight, and deeper still in silence. as if the color was listening, remembering. Beneath the frescoes, the floor was disturbed. Stone tiles pulled back by early archaeologists. Below them, a hidden chamber, low and narrow, packed with bones. 9 bodies, positioned in the same kneeling pose as the frescoes. Spines curved, hands clasped over hollow chests, but no skulls bore tongues. Each had been surgically removed. Clean, precise, not a punishment, but an offering. Folded beneath one body, wrapped in cloth darkened by age, lay a manuscript, bound in leather, sealed with wax, and marked by a symbol, a circle of thorns, surrounding a blank face. Inside, only 9 lines, each written in a hand that shifted shape between verses, as if 9 authors, or 9 selves, had shared one body. The language was not Romanian, not Latin, not Greek. No known script matched the curves. It was sound written in symbol, phonetic keys, not meant to be read, but recited. The last page bore a single sentence, this time in clear Latin. To give sorrow form is to shed self. To pass through the veil is to leave behind the weight of name. The monks who lived in Monasteria Lacrimiler kept no records of this ritual. No homilies, no hymnals, only silence. And yet their walls bore symbols, etched beneath paint, scratched into stone, circles, spirals, eyes without pupils, tongues drawn as flames. When questioned, the surviving brotherhood spoke gently, and only in prayer. But one monk, old, blind, and near death, told a visitor a single story. He said the veil room was never meant for the living, that once a generation, 9 brothers would take the sorrow rite, to carry the grief of the world, to become vessels. He said sorrow was a weight the soul could not bear alone, but if divided, if purified, it could become vision, not through joy, but through suffering without identity. He said the ritual opened a path, but only if one gave up memory, gave up name, gave up voice. Only then would the black sun speak. What was meant by the black sun remains unknown. Some believe it refers to Saturn, symbol of loss, of endings, of ancient time. Others say it is not a celestial body, but an absence, a god that was never named, never prayed to, only served. In 1938, a team of researchers from Austria revisited the monastery. By then, the order had dwindled, the monks spoke little, and the veil room remained sealed once more. But the team carried the manuscript, and with them, a phonetic reconstruction of the chant. They did not sing it, not fully, only the first sorrow, spoken aloud into the cold air. For 3 days, snow fell in summer, birds vanished, clocks stopped at midnight, and every mirror in the monastery cracked from corner to corner, each in the shape of a closed eye. One member of the team, a linguist named Halbert, began speaking in a tongue no one recognized. His journals became incomprehensible, written in mirrored script, curved like the writing in the manuscript. He claimed he could see between moments. That time had bent, not forward, but inward. He said the frescoes whispered when no one watched, and that the 9th sorrow had no name, because it was the one that came after memory. On the 7th day, Halbert walked into the veil room alone. He placed the manuscript at the feet of the frescoed figures. He knelt, and when the others found him, he was smiling, eyes closed, hands folded, and tongue removed, clean, bloodless. He died within the hour. The manuscript was taken, hidden in university archives, locked behind steel and warning, but it is said that the page edges still glow red, and that sometimes, when the lights are off, the circle of thorns shifts, and a face appears, blank, faceless, yet somehow familiar, like the face we see in dreams, before we wake, and forget who we are. The snow melted late that year, not from warmth, but from retreat, as though the sky itself refused to look down. And beneath the monastery, in a corridor untouched by memory, they found stairs, not carved but grown, each step shaped by time not tool, twisting inwards beneath the east wing, where a forgotten chapel waited. There were no doors, no locks, just moss and dust and air too still to be natural. Inside, the walls were whitewashed with lime, but beneath the cracks, crimson patterns pulsed with faint color. 9 circles in a spiral, each incomplete, as if awaiting something or someone. The altar was missing. In its place, a hollow, carved with the same thorns that framed the manuscript, and above it, a single mark, the black sun. The manuscript returned. Halbert's body interred in silence, his face veiled, his tongue burned to ash. They read no rites, spoke no names, only left him among the stones, where the frost never reached. And then they listened. For days the chapel remained quiet, until a whisper began, not loud, not sharp, but like breath drawn through paper. It came from the spiral, a sound with no source, a sigh that circled the room without echo. They placed recorders. They filmed in low light, but the footage dissolved. Magnetic tapes unraveled. Digital drives reset themselves to blank. Even the clocks would not mark time inside. Only the spiral remembered. Then, during the lunar solstice, a monk disappeared. He had taken the manuscript into the lower chapel. Alone, he spoke the first sorrow aloud, then the second, then the third. And when the sun rose, he was gone. No footprints, no sign of struggle, only 9 ash prints, kneeling beside the hollow, and the manuscript, open to the final page. One line now written in red. The 9th sorrow waits beneath the skin of time. A new fresco emerged on the chapel wall. Not painted, not drawn. It bloomed from a stone, like moisture rising through memory. 9 figures, now with faint eyes, circling not the black sun, but a mirror, held aloft by no hand. The mirror was cracked, but it reflected light that was not in the room. They called in linguists, theologians, physicists, each left with different visions. Some saw scripture, others saw faces from dreams. One saw her childhood home exactly as it was before the fire, but none could record what they saw. Only remember, and not for long. The visions faded, memories dissolved. Only fragments remained. A room that hummed, a mirror that spoke, a name they could no longer form. One researcher, a woman named Anna, refused to leave. She claimed the spiral was a map, not to a place, but to emotion, that each sorrow was a lock, and the 9th, the key. She spent nights in silence, kneeling, eyes closed, mouthing the phonetic lines, not aloud, only in breath. And on the 9th night, she wept without knowing why, tears that ran upward, floating toward the ceiling, where they vanished in dust. When she stood, her reflection was gone, not just in the mirror, but in all glass, all water. She cast no echo, left no footprint, and her shadow no longer moved in step. The monastery sealed the chapel again, bricked it behind stone, covered the frescoes in plaster, burned the remaining pages of the manuscript, or so they claimed. But whispers grew, of dreams shared by monks who never met, of footsteps circling empty cells at night, of the spiral returning, not in stone, but in memory. People began drawing it unconsciously, on paper, in snow, in dust collected on window panes. Always 9 circles, always spinning inward. Decades passed. The monastery faded into legend, the veil room forgotten, until a group of travelers in the late 1980s, hiking without a map, found themselves beneath an unfamiliar peak. They discovered a cave entrance, framed with thorns carved into the stone, and inside, walls of whitewashed lime, 9 symbols glowing faintly in the dark. They recorded nothing, took only photos, but every image, upon development, showed their own faces missing, replaced by hollow veils, dripping crimson. The cave vanished days later, covered by a landslide, as though the mountain had remembered something too clearly. The hikers never spoke publicly again. One moved to the coast, another joined a monastery in silence. The third, a painter, spent the last years of her life drawing circles, red on black, black on red, and always a face she could never quite finish. When asked, she said it was the memory of sorrow itself. To this day, In certain monasteries of Eastern Europe, there are hymns sung without words, melodies that follow no pattern, and pause on the ninth note, never finished. Monks wear veils in prayer, not out of shame, but protection, not for themselves, but for what might look back. They say sorrow is not a burden to be carried, but a door to be opened. That grief, when purified, can echo into the spaces between worlds, not as pain, but as invitation. And so the veil of the nine sorrows remains, not in walls, not in paint, but in breath, in the space where words die, in the silence that follows the name you cannot say. It waits, not to be found, but to be remembered. And when it is, it will not speak. It will reflect you and all that you have forgotten how to mourn.